We're good. What's up, everyone? How are you guys doing? Welcome to probably the last live read of the Scarlet Pimpernel. I think we'll probably finish it today. I mean, it's a lot of reading, but I think we'll probably finish it. We have like 40 pages. I think we could do that. It just depends on my voice. If my voice can hold up, then we'll do it. If not, we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll have a little break or something. How you guys? How's everyone doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, one and all. Sorry, texting. What would be smellier, a French in or an English in? Maybe that's the real question. Happy Friday, everyone. It's Friday, weekend. I gotta water my plants. All right, I have a question. For which Dickens we do. I'm 95% sure I want to do the A Tale of Two Cities. But should we do Great Expectations instead of A Tale of Two Cities? Maybe I should do a vote. I feel like we kind of roll with the French Revolution kind of theme and go with The Tale of Two Cities. What do you guys think? Jude the Obscure? I've never even heard of that. What's that? Yeah, French inns would probably smell a little worse. A lot of aromatics. That's a Tom Hardy novel. Okay, interesting. We'll add it to the list. When did Tom Hardy write? Is that considered a classic? (1928). Oh, he wrote Tess. Okay, interesting. And Far from the Maddening Crowd. Okay, interesting. Okay. Yeah, maybe we'll probably stick with A Tale of Two Cities and just compare the French Revolution for both of these. I have a feeling they're both going to kind of picture them the same way. But we'll see. I feel like A Tale of Two Cities is like maybe not his most popular, but maybe the most famous first line and last line. So we'll get it for the first line and last line. I'm just curious to get into Dickens, see what he's all about. I really don't know what to expect, but I think it's gonna be good. I think it'll be a good novel. I've heard good things about Bleak House. I've heard good things about most of what Dickens has wrote. So I'm pretty excited to get into some of his stuff. We can stay in the shadow of Madame de Guillotine. It's true. There's a Penguin classic version of A Tale of Two Cities that's like cloth bound, and it has the knitting needles on the front of it with a bunch of like scarves that it looks like. It's pretty cute. I think that's a copy I just ordered. If I thought this book had a slow start, I'll be a little bit more excited for Dickens. Or patient. His books are slow starts. Yeah, I've heard that Dickens is very, very different from book to book. I think A Tale of Two Cities might be maybe not his biggest outlier, but it seems kind of like that. Ooh, you're a rebinder. I love that. I'm glad that you're jumping in. This is the only way that you're reading it. All right, we're gonna get started quick because we have 40 pages to read. We're gonna try to finish the rest of the book today. So we'll see if we do it. But we'll start in like 2 or 3 minutes. How long ago, how Dickens was alive during the French Revolution? So is that technically his like historical novel? Right, he wasn't alive during the French Revolution. French Revolution was 18th, 17th century. French Revolution, yeah. Dickens. When was Dickens alive? Dickens, 19th century. Yeah, he was a little bit after. Dickens was Victorian. Yeah, I want some Dickensian characters for sure. Hey, Kendrick, what's up? Long time no see. How's your fellowship going? Yeah, I scheduled this last night. I don't know why. I know YouTube's always weird with notifications, so who knows? Interesting. French Revolution was during the Regency era. I wonder if does Jane Austen ever mention it? Like maybe there's fears for some of her characters for going to France. Or all of Jane Austen's novels seem very English to me. They all seem like their place is in England. Scarlet Pimpernel is a shorter book too, so we're getting through it, but I think we're kind of keeping pace with some of the other books, but this is just shorter, so it's just going to take us the last read. Ooh, she mentions Napoleon a few times. Okay, interesting. Yeah, we're about to finish the book, so you can't have it spoiled. Crystal, what's up? Morning. How are you guys? But I think Tale of Two Cities is gonna be next. That's the plan right now. And then I'm trying to figure out what to do with some live reads too, because so I do want to do a long novel. I think this year at some point we'll probably do The Count of Monte Cristo. But I am struggling, and let me know what you guys think about what we should do for it. I'm struggling with the idea of live reading every single chapter of a book like that. That would be intense. I mean, that would be fun, but I think that would take so long. I mean, we could definitely do it. So maybe we'll stick it out and do it. It'll just take a few months. But maybe we just do live reads of maybe we just do like one live read a week or something like that. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how we should live read longer books like that. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we'll just stick it out and do the entire thing. We'll see. I'm excited to read it though. So I'm trying to figure out the order of what we do. So I think April will be A Tale of Two Cities. And then maybe we do the Iliad and the Odyssey for like a little summer. Then maybe we go back to Jane Austen. And then maybe at the end of the summer we do some The Count of Monte Cristo. And we do that till like October, and then we do like a scary book, Frankenstein, for October. I don't know. Those are ambitious plans. I feel like The Count of Monte Cristo might take us 4 or 5 months to do, to be completely honest, because it's huge. Let me look at the page length of that. Let's gauge this. How long is Wuthering Heights? Wuthering Heights versus page length. Versus, come on, spell correctly. Monte Cristo Wuthering Heights. The word count is about 105. Oh gosh, it's gonna take us 4 months, maybe 5 months. It's 100,000 words. The Count of Monte Cristo is about 500,000 words. Maybe we'll just do the Iliad and then we'll do the Odyssey after that. I don't know. We'll see. But that'll take us 5 months. It's 4 to 5 times longer. That'll be. That we could live read it. We could live read every little section. Well, maybe that's too intense. Maybe I'll just do videos of every section, and then we'll do like the key parts. We'll live read. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. But anyway, we're gonna get started on reading because we got 40 pages to read today, and I want to finish it. So, everyone, go get some tea. Go get some coffee. My lighting is all weird because it's a partially cloudy day. But we'll deal with it. It's all right. Let's begin our read. Hold on 1 second. I keep getting text. Sorry. I gotta silence my phone. Everyone, put your phone on silence. When's the fellowship done, Kendrick? When are you gonna rejoin us? After A Tale of Two Cities? Maybe you can catch up with A Tale of Two Cities like halfway through. I'm sure that'll take us probably like a month and change. And then May we'll do the Iliad into June. June, July, August, September. Maybe June, July, August, September, maybe the Count of Monte Cristo. October we'll do Frankenstein or Dracula. November we gotta get back to some Austen. I do want to get back to some Jane Austen. So we got to figure something out. Well, maybe we'll do the shortest Austen. I don't know. Ooh, lots of personal projects. Love that. Okay. Good luck on the move, too. All right, guys, we're going to jump in and read. We'll see you in the Discord if you're leaving now. Let's everyone like the stream, too. Let's do, this is chapter 26. The Jew. All right, let's begin. It took Marguerite some time to collect her scattered senses. The whole of this last short episode had taken place in less than a minute. In Dagon, the soldiers were still about 200 yards away from the Chagris. When she realized what happened, a curious mixture of joy and wonder filled her heart. It was all so neat, so ingenious. Chauvelin was still absolutely helpless, far more so than he could have ever been under a blow from the fist. For now he could neither see, nor hear, nor speak, whilst his cunning adversary had quietly slipped through his fingers. That was like such a good little plot right there. Giving him a little pepper. Blakeney was gone. Obviously to try and join the fugitives at the Père Blanchard's hut. For the moment, true, Chauvelin was helpless. For the moment, the daring Scarlet Pimpernel had not been caught by Dagon and his men. But all the roads in the beach were patrolled. Every place was watched, and every stranger kept in sight. How far could Percy go, thus arrayed in his gorgeous clothes, without being sighted and followed? Now she blamed herself terribly for not having gone down to him sooner, and given him word of warning and love, which perhaps, after all, he needed. He could not know of the orders which Chauvelin had given for his capture. And even now, perhaps. But before all these horrible thoughts had taken concrete form in her brain, she heard the halting, grounding of arms outside, close to the door, and Degas' voice shouting, "Halt!" to his men. Chauvelin had partially recovered. His sneezing had become less violent, and he had struggled to his feet. He managed to reach the door just as Degas' knock was heard on the outside. Chauvelin threw the door open, and before his secretary could say the word, he had managed to stammer between two sneezes. "The tall stranger, quick! Did any of you see him?" "Where, citoyen?" asked Degas in surprise. "Here, man, through that door, not 5 minutes ago." "We saw nothing, citoyen. The moon is not yet up, and you are just 5 minutes too late, my friend," said Chauvelin with concentrated fury. "Citoyen, You did what I ordered you to do," said Chauvelin with impatience. "I know that, but you were a precious long time about it. Fortunately, there is not much harm done, or it had fared ill with you, Citoyen Degas." Degas turned a little pale. There was so much rage and hatred in his superior's whole attitude. "The tall stranger, citoyen," he stammered, "was here in this room 5 minutes ago, having supper at that table. Damn his impudence. For obvious reasons, I dared not tackle him alone. Brogard is too big of a fool. And that cursed Englishman appears to have the strength of a bullock, and so he slipped away under your very nose. He cannot go far without being sighted, citoyen." "Ah?" "Captain Jetley sent 40 men as reinforcements for the patrol duty. 20 went down to the beach. He again assured me that the watch has been constant all day, and that no stranger could possibly get to the beach or reach a boat without being sighted." "That's good. Do the men know their work?" They have had very clear orders, citoyen, and I myself spoke to those who were about to start. They are to shadow, as secretly as possible, any stranger they may see, especially if he be tall, or stoop as he would disguise his height. In no case to detain such a person, of course," said Chauvelin eagerly. "That impudent Scarlet Pimpernel would slip through clumsy fingers. We must let him get to Pere Blanchard's hut now. There surround and capture him." The men understood that, citoyen, and also that, as soon as a tall stranger has been sighted, he must be shadowed, whilst one man is to turn straight back and report to you. "That is right," said Chauvelin, rubbing his hands, well pleased. "I have further news for you, citoyen." "What is it?" "A tall Englishman had a long conversation about 3/4 of an hour ago with a Jew, Reuben by name, who lives not 10 paces from here." "Yes, and?" queried Chauvelin impatiently. "The conversation was all about a horse and a cart, which the tall Englishman wished to hire, and which was to have been ready for him by 11 o'clock. Is it past that now? Where does Reuben live?" "A few minutes' walk from his door." "Send one of the men to find out if the stranger has driven off in Reuben's cart." "Yes, citoyen." Degas went to give the necessary orders to one of the men. Not a word of this conversation between him and Chauvelin had escaped Marguerite, and every word they had spoken seemed to strike at her heart, with terrible hopelessness and dark foreboding. She had come all this way, and with such high hopes and firm determination to help her husband, and so far she had been able to do nothing but to watch, with a heart-breaking anguish, the meshes of the deadly net closing around the darling Scarlet Pimpernel. He could not now advance many steps without spying eyes to track and denounce him. Her own helplessness struck her with a terrible sense of utter disappointment. The possibility of being of the slightest use to her husband had become almost nil, and her hope rested in being allowed to share his fate, whatever it might be ultimately. For the moment, even her chance of ever seeing the man she loved again had become a remote one. She was still determined to keep a close watch over his enemy, and a vague hope filled her heart that whilst she kept Chauvelin in sight, Percy's fate might still be hanging in the balance. Degas had left Chauvelin moodily pacing up and down the room, whilst himself waited outside for the return of the man whom he had sent in search of Reuben. Thus several minutes went by. Chauvelin was evidently devoured with impatience. Apparently he trusted no one. This last trick played upon him by the daring Scarlet Pimpernel had made him suddenly doubtful of success, unless he himself was there to watch, direct, or superintend the capture of this impudent Englishman. About 5 minutes later, Degas returned, followed by an elderly Jew, in a dirty, threadbare gabardine, worn greasy across the shoulders. His red hair, which he wore after the fashion of the Polish Jew, with the corkscrew curls each side of his face, was plentifully sprinkled with gray. A general coating of grime about his cheeks and chin gave him a peculiarly dirty and loathsome appearance. He had a habitual stoop, those of his race affected in mock humility in past centuries, before the dawn of equality and freedom in matters of faith. And he walked behind Degas with a peculiar shuffling gait which has remained the characteristic of the Jew trader in continental Europe to this day. Okay. Chauvelin, who had all the Frenchman's prejudice against the despised race, motioned to keep the fellow at a respectful distance. The group of 3 men were standing just underneath the hanging oil lamp, and Marguerite had a clear view of them all. "Is this the man?" asked Chauvelin. "No, citoyen," replied Degas. "Reuben could not be found, so presumably that his cart has gone with the stranger. But this man seems to know something which he is willing to sell for a consideration." "Ah," said Chauvelin, turning away with disgust from the loathsome specimen of humanity before him. I like that this is a further reinforcing our hatred of Chauvelin, and that he's not just evil, he's racist. The Jew, with characteristic patience, stood humbly on one side, leaning on a thick knotted staff, his greasy, broad-brimmed hat casting a deep shadow over his grimy face, waiting for the noble excellency to deign to put some questions to him. "The citoyen tells me," said Chauvelin peremptorily to him, "that you know something of my friend, the tall Englishman whom I desire to meet. Morbleu, keep your distance, man," he added hurriedly, as the Jew took a quick, eager step forward. "Yes, your excellency," replied the Jew, who spoke with the language with that peculiar lisp which denotes Eastern origin. "I and Reuben Goldstein met a tall Englishman on the road, close by here this evening." This seems like, is this folks in disguise? I don't think so, but maybe? "He spoke to us, your excellency. He wanted to know if he could hire a horse and cart to go down along the St. Martin Road, to a place he wanted to reach tonight." "What did you say?" "I did not say anything," said the Jew, in an injured tone. "Reuben Goldstein, that accursed traitor, that son of Belial—" "Cut that short, man," interrupted Chauvelin roughly, "and go on with your story." "He took the words out of my mouth, your excellency, when I was about to offer the wealthy Englishman my horse and cart to take him wheresoever he chose. Reuben has already spoken and offered his half-starved nag and his broken-down cart. And what did the Englishman do? He listened to Reuben Goldenstein, your excellency, and he put his hand in his pocket, and there he took out a handful of gold, which he showed to that descendant of Beelzebub, telling him that he would be his if the horse and cart were ready for him by 11 o'clock. And of course the horse and cart were ready? Well, they were ready in a manner, so to speak, your excellency. Reuben's nag was lame as usual. She refused to budge at first. It was only after time, with plenty of kicks, that she could at last be made to move," said the Jew, with a malicious chuckle. "Then they started?" "Yes, they started about 5 minutes ago. I was disgusted with that stranger's folly, an Englishman, too. He ought to have known Reuben's nag was not fit to drive. But if he had no choice—" "No choice, your excellency," protested the Jew, in a rasping voice. "Did I not repeat to him a dozen times that my horse and cart would make him quicker and more comfortably than Reuben's bag of bones? He would not listen. Reuben is such a liar, and has such insinuating ways. The stranger was deceived if he was in a hurry. He would have had better value for his money by taking my cart." "You have a horse and cart too, then?" asked Chauvelin peremptorily. "Aye, that I have, your excellency. And if your excellency wants to drive—" "Do you happen to know which way my friend went in Reuben Goldstein's cart?" Thoughtfully, the Jew rubbed his dirty chin. Marguerite's heart was beating well nigh to bursting. She had heard the peremptory question, She looked anxiously at the Jew, but could not read his face beneath the shadow of his broad-brimmed hat. Vaguely, she felt somehow as if he had held Percy's fate in his long, dirty hands. There was a long pause, while Chauvelin frowned impatiently at the stooping figure before him. At last the Jew slowly put his hand in his breast pocket, and he drew out from its capacious depths a number of silver coins. He gazed at them thoughtfully, then remarked in a quieter tone of voice, "This is what the tall stranger gave me when he drove away with Reuben, for holding my tongue about him and his doings." Chauvelin shrugged his shoulders impatiently. "How much is there, Your Excellency?" How much is there, he asked. 20 francs, Your Excellency, replied the Jew, "and I have been an honest man all my life." Chauvelin, without further comment, took a few pieces of gold out of his own pocket, and leaving them in the palm of his hand, he allowed them to jingle as he held them out toward the Jew. "How many gold pieces are there in the palm of my hand?" he asked quietly. Evidently he had no desire to terrorize the man, but to conciliate him, for his own purpose, for his manner was pleasant and suave. No doubt he feared that the threats of the guillotine and various other persuasive methods of that type might addle the old man's brains, and that he would be more likely to be useful through greed of grain than through terror of death. The eyes of the Jew shot a quick, keen glance at the gold in his interlocutor's hand. "At least 5, I should say, Your Excellency," he replied obsequiously. "Enough, do you think, to loosen that honest tongue of yours? What does Your Excellency wish to know?" "Whether your horse and cart can take me to where I can find my friend, the tall stranger who was driven off in Reuben Goldstein's cart." "My horse and cart can take your honor there, where you please." "To a place called Père Blanchard's hut?" "Your honor has guessed," said the Jew in astonishment. "You know the place." "I know it, Your honor." "Which road leads to it?" "The St. Martin Road, Your honor." "Then a footpath from there to the cliffs." "You know the road?" repeated Chauvelin roughly. "Every stone, every blade of grass, Your honor," replied the Jew quietly. Chauvelin, without another word, threw the 5 pieces of gold one by one before the Jew, who knelt down, and on his hands and knees struggled to collect them. One rolled away, and he had some trouble to get it, for it had lodged underneath the dresser. Chauvelin quietly waited for the old man to scramble on the floor to find the piece of gold. When the Jew was again on his feet, Chauvelin said, "How soon can your horse and cart be ready?" "They are ready now, Your honor." "Where?" "Not 10 meters from this door. Will Your Excellency deign to look?" "I don't want to see it." "How far can you drive me in it?" "As far as Père Blanchard's hut, Your honor, and further than Reuben's nag took your friend. I am sure that not 2 leagues from here we shall come across that wily Reuben, his nag, his cart, and the tall stranger, all in a heap in the middle of the road." "How far is the nearest village from here?" "On the road which the Englishman took, Miquelon is the nearest village, not 2 leagues from here. There he can get fresh conveyance if he wanted to go further. He could if he ever got so far." "Can you?" "Will Your Excellency try?" said the Jew simply. "That is my intention," said Chauvelin very quietly. "But remember, if you have deceived me, I shall tell off 2 of my most stalwart soldiers to give you such a beating that your breath will perhaps leave your ugly body forever. But if we find my friend, the tall Englishman, either on the road or at Père Blanchard's hut, there will be 10 more gold pieces for you. Do you accept the bargain?" The Jew again thoughtfully rubbed his chin. He looked at the money in his hand, and then at his stern interlocutor, and at Degas, who had stood silently behind him all this while. After a moment's pause, he said deliberately, "I accept." "Go and wait outside then," said Chauvelin, "and remember to stick to your bargain, or by heaven I will keep to mine." With a final, most abject and cringing blow, the old Jew shuffled out of his room. Chauvelin seemed pleased with this interview, for he rubbed his hands together, with that usual gesture of his, of malignant satisfaction. "My coat and boots," he said to Degas at last. Degas went to the door, and abruptly gave the necessary orders, for presently a soldier entered, carrying Chauvelin's coat, boots, and hat. He took off his soutane, beneath which he was wearing close-fitted breeches and a cloth waistcoat, and began changing his attire. You, citoyen, in the meanwhile, he said to Degas, go back to Captain Jutley as fast as you can and tell him to let you have another dozen men and bring them with you along the St. Martin road, where I dare say you will soon overtake the Jew's cart with myself in it. There will be hot work presently, if I mistake not, in the Paris Blanchard's hut. We shall corner our game there, I'll warrant, for this impudent Scarlet Pimpernel has had the audacity or the stupidity, I hardly know which, to adhere to his original plans. He has gone to meet de Tournay, Saint Just, and the other traitors, for which the moment, I thought, perhaps, he did not intend to do. When we find them, there will be a band of desperate men at bay. Some of our men, I presume, will be put hors de combat. These royalists are good swordsmen, and the Englishman is a devilish cunning, and looks very powerful. Still, we shall be 5 against 1 at least. You can follow the cart closely with your men, all along the St. Martin road, through Miquelon. The Englishman is ahead of us, and not likely to look behind. Whilst he gave these curt and concise orders, he had completed his change of attire. The priest's costume had been laid aside, and he was once more dressed in his usual dark, tight-fitting clothes. At last he took up his hat. I shall have an interesting prisoner to deliver into your hands, he said with a chuckle. As with unwonted familiarity, he took Degas' arm and led him toward the door. We won't kill him outright, friend Degas? The Paris Blanchard's hut is, and I mistake not, a lonely spot upon the beach, and our men will enjoy a bit of rough sport there with the wounded fox. Choose your men well, friend Degas. Of the sort who would enjoy that type of sport, We must see that the Scarlet Pimpernel wither a bit. What? Shrink and tremble, Before we finally... He made an expressive gesture, while he laughed a low, evil laugh, which filled Marguerite's soul with a sickening horror. Choose your men well, citoyen Degas, he said once more, as he led his secretary finally out of the room. Dang! So this guy's even like he's terrible, but he's like even worse. He's like, we're gonna go torture him. I feel like that's Andrew Folks. I can't back that up, but it just feels right. I'm gonna say that it is. I don't know for sure, but I think that's the case. All right, next chapter, 27. Never for a moment did Margaret Blakeney hesitate. The last sounds outside the Chaugerie had died away in the night. She had heard Degas giving orders to his men, and then starting off toward the fort to get reinforcements of a dozen more men. 6 were not thought sufficient to capture the cunning Englishman, whose resourceful brain was even more dangerous than his valor and his strength. Then, a few minutes later, she heard the Jew's husky voice again, evidently shouting to his nag, and the rumble of wheels and the noise of a rickety cart bumping over the rough road. Inside the inn, everything was still. Beauregard and his wife, terrified of Chauvelin, had given no sign of life. They hoped to be forgotten, and at any rate, to remain unperceived. Marguerite could not even hear their usual volley of muttered oaths. She waited a moment or two longer, and she quietly slipped down the broken stairs, wrapped her dark cloak closely around her, and slipped out of the inn. Hold on, I feel a sneeze coming on. Here we go, it's coming. Ugh. Excuse me. Whew. Wow. That cleared the sinuses. The night was fairly dark, sufficiently so at any rate to hide her dark figure from view, whilst her keen ears kept count of the sound of the cart going on ahead. She hoped by keeping well within the shadow of the ditches which lined the road that she would not be seen by Degas' men, which they approached, or when they approached, or by the patrols, which she concluded were still on duty. Thus she started to do this, the last stage of her weary journey, alone at night and on foot, nearly 3 leagues to Miquelon, and then on to Pere Blanchard's hut, wherever the final spot, wherever that fatal spot might be, probably over the rough roads, she cared not. The Jew's nag could not get on his feet the Jew's nag could not get on very fast. And she thought she was weary with mental fatigue and nerve strain. She knew that she could not keep up with it on a hilly road, where the poor beast, who was sure to be half starved, would have to be allowed long and frequent rests. The road lay some distance from the sea, bordered on either side by shrubs and stunted trees, sparsely covered with meager foliage, all turning away from the north, with their branches looking in the semi-darkness like stiff, ghostly hair blown by a perpetual wind. Fortunately, the moon showed no desire to peep between the clouds, and Marguerite, hugging the edge of the road and keeping close to a low line of shrubs, was fairly safe from view. Excuse me. Everything around her was so still. Only from very far away, there came a long, soft moan, the sound of the distant sea. The air was keen and full of brine. After that enforced period of inactivity, inside the evil-smelling squalid inn, Marguerite would have enjoyed the sweet scent of this autumnal night, and the distant melancholy rumble of the waves. She would have reveled in the calm and silliness and the stillness of this lonely spot, a calm broken only at intervals by the strident and mournful cry of some distant gull, and by the creaking of the wheels, and some way down the road. She would have loved the cool atmosphere, the peaceful immensity of nature in this lonely part of the coast, but her heart was too full of cruel foreboding, of a great ache and longing for a being who had become infinitely dear to her. Her feet slipped on the grassy bank, for she thought it safest not to walk near the center of the road. She found it difficult to keep up a sharp pace along the muddy incline. She even thought it best not to keep too near to the cart. Everything was so still that the rumble of the wheels could not fail to be a safe guide. The loneliness was absolute. Already the few dim lights of Calais far behind, and on this road there was not a sign of any human habitation, not even the hut of the fisherman, or of a woodcutter anywhere near. Far away on her right was the edge of a cliff. Below it was the rough beach, against which the incoming tide was dashing itself with constant distant murmur. And ahead the rumble of the wheels bearing an implacable enemy to his triumph. Marguerite wondered at what particular spot this lonely coast Percy could be at this moment. Not very far, surely, for he had less than a quarter of an hour's start of Chauvelin's. She wondered if he knew that in this cool, ocean-scented bit of France there lurked many spies, all eager to sight his tall figure, to track him to where his unsuspecting friends waited for him, and then to close the net over him and them. Chauvelin on ahead, jolted and jostled in the Jew's vehicle, was nursing comfortable thoughts. He rubbed his hands together with content, and he thought of the web which he had woven, and through which that ubiquitous and daring Englishman could not hope to escape. As the time went on, and the old Jew drove him leisurely but surely along the dark road, he felt more and more eager for the grand finale of this exciting chase after the mysterious Scarlet Pimpernel. The capture of the audacious plotter would be the finest leaf in the citoyen Chauvelin's wreath of glory. Caught red-handed on the spot in the very act of aiding and abetting the traitors against the Republic of France, the Englishman could claim no protection from his own country. Chauvelin had, in any case, fully made up his mind that all intervention should come too late. Never for a moment did the slightest remorse enter his heart. As to the terrible position in which he had placed the unfortunate wife, who had unconsciously betrayed her husband. As a matter of fact, Chauvelin had ceased even to think of her. She had been a useful tool, that was all. The Jew's lean nag did little more than walk. She was going along at a slow jog trot, and her driver had to give her long and frequent halts. "Are we a long way yet from Miquelon?" asked Chauvelin from time to time. "Not very far, Your Honor," was the uniform, placid reply. "We have not yet come across your friend and mine, lying in a heap in the roadway," was Chauvelin's sarcastic comment. "Patience, noble excellency," rejoined the son of Moses. "They are ahead of us. I can see the imprint of the cartwheels driven by that traitor, the son of the Amalekite." "You are sure of the road?" "As sure as I am of the presence of those 10 gold pieces in the noble excellency's pocket, which I trust will presently be mine. As soon as I have shaken hands with my friend, the tall stranger, they will certainly be yours." "Hark, what was that?" said the Jew suddenly. Through the stillness, which had been absolute, there could now be heard distinctly the sound of horse hooves on the muddy road. "They are soldiers," he added in an awed whisper. "Stop a moment, I want to hear," said Chauvelin. Marguerite had also heard sounds of galloping hooves coming toward the cart and toward herself. For some time she had been on the alert, thinking that Degas and his squad would soon overtake them, but these came from the opposite direction, presumably from Miquelon. The darkness lent her sufficient cover. She had perceived that the cart had stopped, and with utmost caution, treading noiselessly on the soft road, she crept a little nearer. Her heart was beating fast. She was trembling in every limb. Already she had guessed what news these mounted men would bring. Every stranger on these roads or on the beach must be shadowed, especially if he be tall, or stoops, as if he would disguise his height. When sighted, a mounted messenger must at once ride back and report. Those had been Chauvelin's orders. Had then the tall stranger been sighted, and was this the mounted messenger come to bring the great news that the hunted hare had run its head into the noose at last? Marguerite realized that the cart had come to a standstill, managed to slip nearer to it in the darkness, and crept close up, hoping to get within earshot to hear what the messenger had to say. She heard the words of challenge: liberty, eternity, equality, fraternity, equality. Then Chauvelin's quick query: "What news?" 2 men on horseback had halted beside the vehicle. Marguerite could see them silhouetted against the midnight sky. She could hear their voices and their snorting of their horses, and now behind her, some little distance off, the regular and measured tread of a body of advancing men. Degas and his soldiers. There had been a long pause, during which, no doubt, Chauvelin satisfied the men as to his identity, for presently questions and answers followed each other in quick succession. "You have seen the stranger?" asked Chauvelin eagerly. "No, citoyen, we have seen no tall stranger. We came by the edge of the cliff. Then, less than a quarter of a league beyond Miquelon, we came across a rough construction of wood, which looked like the hut of a fisherman, where he might keep his tools and nets. When we first sighted it, it seemed to be empty, and at first we thought that there was nothing suspicious about it until we saw some smoke issuing through an aperture on the side. I dismounted and crept closer to it. It was then empty, but in one corner of the hut there was a charcoal fire, and a couple of stools were also in the hut. I consulted with my comrades, and we decided that they should take cover with the horses well out of sight, and that I should remain on the watch, which I did." "Well, and did you see anything?" "About half an hour later I heard voices, citoyen, and presently 2 men came along the road toward the edge of the cliff, and they seemed to me to have come from the Lillet road. One was young and the other quite old. They were talking in a whisper to one another, and I could not hear what they said." One was young, the other was old. Marguerite's aching heart almost stopped beating as she listened. Was the young one Armand, her brother, and the old one de Tournay? Were they the 2 fugitives who unconsciously were used as decoys to entrap their fearless and noble rescuer? The 2 men presently went into a hut, continued the soldier, whilst Marguerite's aching nerves seemed to catch to the sound of Chauvelin's triumphant chuckle. And I crept nearer to it then. The hut is a very roughly built. And I caught snatches of their conversation. Yes? Quick, what did you hear? The old man asked the young one if he were sure that that was the right place. Oh, yes, he replied. 'Tis the place, sure enough. By the light of the charcoal fire, he showed to his companion the paper which he carried. Here is the plan, he said, which he gave me before I left London. We were to adhere strictly to the plan unless I had contrary orders, and I have had none. Here is the road we followed, see? Here the fork. Here we cut across the St. Martin Road. And here is the footpath which brought us to the edge of the cliff. I must have made a slight noise then, for the young man came to the door of the hut and peered anxiously all around him. When he again joined his companion, and they whispered so low that I could no longer hear them. Well, and, said Chauvelin impatiently. There were 6 of us altogether patrolling that part of the beach. So we consulted together, and thought it best that 4 should remain behind and keep the hut in sight, and I and my comrade rode back at once to make report of what we had seen. You saw nothing of the tall stranger? Nothing, citoyen. If your comrades see him, what would they do? Not lose sight of him for a moment. And if he showed signs of escape, or any boat came in sight, they would close in on him, and if necessary, they would shoot. The firing would bring the rest of the patrol to the spot. In any case, they would not let the stranger go. Aye, but I did not want the stranger hurt, not just yet, murmured Chauvelin savagely. But there, you've done your best. The fates grant that I may not be too late. We met 6 men just now, who have been patrolling this road for several hours. Well, they have seen no stranger either. Yet, he is on ahead somewhere, in a cart, or else here. There is not a moment to lose. How far is that hut from here? About a couple of leagues, citoyen. You can find it again at once, without hesitation? I have absolutely no doubt, citoyen. The footpath to the edge of the cliff, even in the dark. It is not a dark night, citoyen, and I know I can find my way, repeated the soldier firmly. Fall in behind then. Let your comrade take both your horses back to Calais. You won't want them. Keep beside the cart, and direct the Jew to drive straight ahead. Then stop him within a quarter of a league of the footpath. See that he takes the most direct road. While Chauvelin spoke, Dagon and his men were fast approaching, and Marguerite could hear their footsteps within 100 yards behind her now. She thought it unsafe to stay where she was, and unnecessary too, as she had heard enough. She seemed suddenly to have lost all faculty for even suffering. Her heart, her nerves, her brain seemed to have become numb after all these hours of ceaseless anguish, culminating in this awful despair. For now there was absolutely not the faintest hope. Within 2 short leagues of the spot, the fugitives were waiting for their brave deliverer. He was on his way somewhere on this lonely road, and presently he would join them. Then the well-laid trap would close. 24 men, led by one whose hatred was as deadly as his cunning was malicious, would close round the small band of fugitives and their daring leader. They would all be captured. Armand, according to Chauvelin's pledged word, would be restored to her, and her husband, Percy, whom with every breath she drew seemed to love and worship more and more, he would fall into the hands of a remorseless enemy, who had no pity for a brave heart, no admiration for the courage of a noble soul, who would show nothing but hatred for the cunning antagonist, who had baffled him so long. She heard the soldiers giving up a few brief directions to the Jew, and then she retired quickly to the edge of the road and cowered behind some low shrubs, whilst Dagon and his men came up, and fell noiselessly behind the cart, and slowly they all started back down the dark road. Marguerite waited until she reckoned they were well outside the range of earshot. Then she, too, in the darkness, which suddenly seemed to have become more intense, crept noiselessly along. I feel like all of these people, I feel like this is all the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel. I think that this is what's happening. I think that Chauvelin thinks that he has all these people at his command. I think all of these soldiers are the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel. And I think they're essentially trying to trap Chauvelin in this one little hut, and they're going to, like, you know, have a talking to with him. I don't know if they're going to kill him or not. I feel like Chauvelin's going to die at the end of this by his own doing. But I feel like this is all the League. And they're like, this is like a double we gotcha. So that's kind of where I'm going right here. At the very least, I'm almost thinking that Percy might be their driver. Imagine if he was their driver and he was literally disguised and Chauvelin didn't even see him right under his nose. Honestly, that could be kind of it too. I feel like there's a little bit of a precedent for that. Everything just feels so sus in this right now. That's true that he probably would be in some of the other novels if they didn't kill him. But they definitely won't kill him, but they would allow him to, like, I keep thinking of the scene in Tarzan when what's the guy's name? Kerchak? Clayton. When Clayton ends up dying by chopping all those vines and then he ends up getting strangled. It was a gruesome death in a Disney movie. But I feel like that's kind of it. Like he's gonna, like, maybe Chauvelin won't die, but he's gonna be like, I was foiled, and then he ends up taking a gun or something like that. I don't know, but I definitely think that this is the whole League of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Like, I don't think that they would be saying, I don't think that they would be saying that there's like 20 people who would follow the Scarlet Pimpernel into death if these 20 people didn't follow him and were helping him out here. It is a bit weird that he's not more suspicious too. Totally agree. Falling from a height like a Disney villain. He might, honestly. He might fall off one of these cliffs. Honestly, they keep mentioning the cliffs. Is he going to fall from one of these cliffs? That's my theory right now. I feel like that's where it's going. Maybe that was divine inspiration right there for me thinking about Clayton. This is fun. This is like this is one of those where, like, you know that obviously the Scarlet Pimpernel is going to succeed, but it's fun just seeing them how to figure out, or it's fun to figure out how they're going to do this. And you know that there's something weird going on, but you just don't know what yet. This is kind of fun. It's fun to piece this together. He's way too clever to leave any loopholes in his plan, I think. Chauvelin's not. Chauvelin thinks that he is. But the Scarlet Pimpernel is just always one step ahead of him. I would love if the Scarlet Pimpernel, if Percy was their driver right now. That would cap it off. That would be so great. I would love that. Yeah, looking for the trick is definitely fun. Definitely agree with that. All right, let's do the next chapter. This is chapter 28. These are like all manageable chapters too. I love this. I love a book like that. Hold on, I'm gonna mute myself and then clear my throat. Give me a sec. Thank you. Need a sip of water. I need to like start protecting my voice more. All right, this is chapter 28. The Père Blanchard's hut. As in a dream, Marguerite followed on. The web was drawing more and more tightly every every moment round the beloved life, which had become dearer than all. To see her husband once again, to tell him how she had suffered, how much she had wronged, to tell him of her nerves, how little understood him, and had become now her only aim. She had abandoned all hope of saving him. She saw him gradually hemmed in on all sides in despair. She gazed round into the darkness and wondered whence she would presently come, to fall into the death trap which his relentless enemy had prepared for him. The distant roar of the waves now made her shudder. The occasional dismal cry of an owl or a seagull filled her with unspeakable horror. She thought of the ravenous beast in human shape who lay in wait for their prey and destroyed them mercilessly as any hungry wolf for the satisfaction of their own appetites of hate. Marguerite was not afraid of the darkness. Also, that's not really how animals work. I don't know of any animal that kills another animal for hate. But, okay. Maybe there's a few animals that would do that. Marguerite was not afraid of the darkness. She only feared that man on ahead who was sitting at the bottom of a rough wooden cart, nursing thoughts of vengeance, which would have made the very demons in hell chuckle with delight. Her feet were sore. Her knees shook under her from sheer bodily fatigue. For days now she had lived in wild turmoil of excitement. She had not a quiet rest for 3 nights now. She had walked on a slippery road for nearly 2 hours, and yet her determination never swerved for a moment. She would see her husband, tell him all, and if he was ready to forgive the crime, which she had committed in her blind ignorance, she would yet have the happiness of dying by his side. She must have walked on, almost in a trance, instinct alone keeping her up, and guiding her in the wake of the enemy, when suddenly her ears, attuned to the slightest sound by that same blind instinct, told her that the cart had stopped, and that the soldiers had halted. They had come to their destination. No doubt on the right, somewhere close ahead, was the footpath that led to the edge of the cliff to the hut. Heedless of any risks, she crept close to where Chauvelin stood, surrounded by this little troop. He had descended from the cart and was giving some orders to the men. These she wanted to hear. What little chance she had yet of being useful to Percy consisted in the hearing absolutely every word of his enemy's plans. The spot where all the party had halted must have lain some 800 meters from the coast. The sound of the sea came only very faintly, as from a distance. Chauvelin and Degas, followed by the soldiers, had turned off sharply to the right of the road, apparently onto the footpath, which led to the cliffs. The Jew had remained on the road, with his cart and nag. Marguerite, with infinite caution, and literally crawling on her hands and knees, had also turned off to the right. To accomplish this, she had crept through the rough, low shrubs, trying to make as little noise as possible as she went along, tearing her face and her hands against the dry twigs, intent only upon hearing without being seen or heard. Fortunately, as is usual in the parts of France, the footpath was bordered by a low, rough hedge, beyond which was a dry ditch filled with coarse grass. In this, Marguerite managed to find shelter. She was quite hidden from view, yet contrived to get within 3 yards of where Chauvelin stood, giving orders to his men. Now, he was saying in a low, peremptory whisper, "Where is the Père Blanchard's hut?" "About 800 meters from here, along the footpath," said the soldier, who had lately been directing the party, "and halfway down the cliff." "Very good. You shall lead us. Before we begin to descend the cliff, you shall creep down to that hut as noiselessly as possible and ascertain if the traitor royalists are there. Do you understand?" "I understand, citoyen." "Now listen very attentively, all of you," continued Chauvelin, impressively, and addressing his soldiers collectively. "For after this we may not be able to exchange another word, so remember every syllable I utter. If your very lives depend on your memory, perhaps they do," he added dryly. "We listen, citoyen," said Degas, "and a soldier of the Republic never forgets an order. You who have crept up to the hut will try to peep inside. If an Englishman is there with those traitors, a man who is tall above average and who stoops as if he would disguise his height." Again, that's a line that makes me think that Percy is their driver in us, stooped in his height. I definitely think that he is now. I'm pretty convinced that he is. "All of you," he added, He would disguise his height. Then give a quick, sharp whistle as a signal to your comrades, all of you. He added once more, speaking to the soldiers collectively. Then quickly surround and rush into the hut, and each seize one of the men there before they have time to draw their firearms. If any of them struggle, shoot at their legs or arms, but on no account kill the tall man. Do you understand? We understand, citoyen. The man who is tall above average is probably also strong above average. It will take 4 or 5 of you at least to overpower him. There was a little pause, and then Chauvelin continued. If the royalist traitors are still alone, which is more than likely to be the case, then warn your comrades who are lying in wait there, and all of you creep and take cover behind the rocks and boulders around the hut, and wait there in dead silence until the tall Englishman arrives. Then only rush the hut when he is safely within its doors. But remember you must be as silent as the wolf is at night, when he prowls around the pens. I do not wish those royalists to be on alert. The firing of a pistol, a shriek or call on their part would be sufficient, perhaps, to warn the tall personage to keep clear of the cliffs and of the hut. And, he added emphatically, if it is the tall Englishman whom it is your duty to capture tonight, you shall be implicitly obeyed, citoyen. Then get along as noiselessly as possible, and I will follow you. What about the Jew, citoyen? Asked Degas. As silently, like noiseless shadows, one by one, the soldiers began to creep along the rough and narrow footpath. Ah, yes, I had forgotten the Jew, said Chauvelin. And turning toward the Jew, he called him peremptorily. Here, you, Aaron, Moses, Abraham, or whatever your confounded name may be, he said to the old man, who had quietly stood beside his lean nag, as far away from the soldiers as possible. Benjamin Rosenbaum. So it please your honor, he replied humbly. It does not please me to hear your voice, but it does please me to give you certain orders, which you will find it wise to obey. So it please your honor. Hold your confounded tongue. You shall stay here, do you hear? With your horse and cart until our return. You are on no account to utter the faintest sound, even to breathe louder than you can help. Nor are you, on any consideration whatever, to leave your post until I give you orders to do so. Do you understand? But your honor, protested the Jew pitiably. There is no question of but, or of any argument, said Chauvelin, in a tone that made the timid old man tremble from head to foot. If when I return I do not find you here, I most solemnly assure you that whatever you may be trying to hide yourself, I can find you. And that punishment, swift, sure, and terrible, will sooner or later overtake you. Do you hear me? But your excellency, I said, do you hear me? The soldiers had all crept away. The 3 men stood alone, together in the dark and lonely road, with Marguerite here behind the hedge, listening to Chauvelin's orders, as she would to her own death sentence. I heard, your honor, protested the Jew again, while he tried to draw near to Chauvelin, and I swear by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that I would obey your honor most absolutely, and that I would not move from this place until your honor once more deigned to shed the light of your countenance upon your humble servant. But remember, your honor, I am a poor old man. My nerves are not as strong as those of young soldiers. If midnight marauders should come by prowling round this lonely road, I might scream or run in my fright. And is my life to be forfeit? Is some terrible punishment to come on my poor old head for that which I cannot help? This is definitely Percy. I definitely think it is. The Jew seemed in real distress. He was shaking from head to foot. Clearly he was not the man to be left by himself on this lonely road. The man spoke truly. He might unwittingly, in sheer terror, utter the shriek that might prove a warning to the wily Scarlet Pimpernel. Chauvelin reflected for a moment. Will your horse and cart be safe alone here, do you think? He asked roughly. I fancy, citoyen, here interposed Degas, that they will be safer without that dirty, cowardly Jew than with him. There seemed no doubt that, if he gets scared, he will either make a bolt of it or shriek his head off. But what am I to do with the brute? Will you send him back to Calais, citoyen? No, for we shall want him back to drive the wounded presently, said Chauvelin, with grim significance. There was a pause again. Degas waiting for the decision of his chief, and the old Jew whining beside his nag. Well, you lazy, lumbering old coward, said Chauvelin at last. You had better shuffle along behind us. Here, citoyen Degas, tie this handkerchief tightly around the fellow's mouth. Chauvelin handed the scarf to Degas, who solemnly began winding it around the Jew's mouth. Meekly, Benjamin Rosenbaum allowed himself to be gagged. He evidently preferred this uncomfortable state to that of being left alone on the dark St. Martin road, and the three men fell in line. Quick, said Chauvelin impatiently, we have already wasted much valuable time. In the firm footsteps of Chauvelin and Degas, the shuffling gait of the old Jew soon died away along the footpath. Marguerite had not lost a single one of Chauvelin's words of command. Her every nerve was strained to completely grasp the situation, then to make a final appeal to those wits which had been often called the sharpest in Europe, and which alone might be of service now. Certainly the situation was desperate enough. A tiny band of unsuspecting men quietly awaiting the arrival of their rescuer, who was equally unconscious of the trap laid for them all. It seemed so horrible, this net, as if it were drawn in a circle, at dead of night, on a lonely beach, round a few defenseless men. Defenseless because they were tricked and unsuspecting. Of these was the husband she idolized, another the brother she loved. She vaguely wondered who the others were, who were also calmly waiting for the Scarlet Pimpernel, while death lurked behind every boulder of the cliffs. For the moment she could do nothing but follow the soldier and Chauvelin. She feared to lose her way, or she would have rushed forward and found that wooden hut, and perhaps been in time to warn the fugitives of their brave deliverer yet. For a second, the thought flashed through her mind of uttering the piercing shrieks which Chauvelin seemed to dread, and a possible warning to the Scarlet Pimpernel and his friends, in the wild hope that they would hear, and have yet time to escape before it was too late. But she did not know how far from the edge of the cliff she was. She did not know that if her shrieks would reach the ears of the doomed men, her efforts might be premature, and she would never be allowed to make another. Her mouth would be securely gagged like that of the Jew, and she a helpless prisoner in the hands of Chauvelin's men. Like a ghost, she flitted noiselessly behind that hedge. She had taken her shoes off, and her stockings were by now worn off her feet. She felt neither soreness nor weariness. Indomitable will to reach her husband in spite of adverse fate, end of a cunning enemy, killed all sense of bodily pain within her, and rendered her instincts doubly acute. She heard nothing save the soft, measured footsteps of Percy's enemies on in front. She saw nothing but in her mind's eye that wooden hut, and he, her husband, walking blindly to his doom. Suddenly, those same keen instincts within her made her pause in her mad haste, and cower still further within the shadow of the hedge. The moon, which had proved a friend to her by remaining hidden behind the bank of clouds, now emerged in all glory of an early autumn night, and in a moment flooded the weird and lonely landscape with a rush of brilliant light. There, not 200 meters ahead, was the edge of the cliff, and below, stretching far away to free and happy England, the sea rolled on smoothly and peaceably. Marguerite's gaze rested for an instant on the brilliant silvery waters, and as she gazed, her heart, which had been numb with pain for all these hours, seemed to soften and distend, and her eyes filled with hot tears. Not 3 miles away, with white sails set, a graceful schooner lay in wait. Marguerite had guessed rather than recognized her. It was the Daydream, Percy's favorite yacht, with old Briggs, that prince of skippers, aboard, and all her crew of British sailors. Her white sails, glistening in the moonlight, seemed to convey a message to Marguerite of joy and hope, which she yet feared could never be. She waited there out at sea, waited for her master like a beautiful white bird all ready to take flight. And he would never reach her, never see her smooth deck again, never gaze any more on the white cliffs of England, the land of liberty and of hope. The sight of the schooner seemed to infuse into the poor, wearied woman the superhuman strength of despair. There was the edge of the cliff, and some way below was the hut, where presently her husband would meet his death. But the moon was out. She could see her way now. She would see the hut from a distance, run to it, rouse them all, warn them at any rate to be prepared and to sell their lives dearly rather than be caught like this, like so many rats in a hole. She stumbled on behind the hedge in the low, thick grass of the ditch. She must have run on very fast, and had outdistanced Chauvelin and Degas, for presently she reached the edge of the cliff and heard their footsteps distinctly behind her, but only a few yards away, and now the moonlight was full upon her. Her figure must have been distinctly silhouetted against the silvery background of the sea. Only for a moment, though. The next she had cowered, like some animal doubled up within itself. She peeped down the great rugged cliffs. The descent would be easy enough, as they were not precipitous, and the great boulders afforded plenty of foothold. Suddenly, as she gazed, she saw at some little distance on her left, and about midway down the cliffs, a rough wooden construction, through the walls of which a tiny red light glimmered like a beacon. Her very heart seemed to stand still. The eagerness of joy was so great that it felt like an awful pain. She could not gauge how distant the hut was, but without hesitation she began the steep descent, creeping from boulder to boulder, caring nothing for the enemy behind, or for the soldiers who evidently had all taken cover since the tall Englishman had not yet appeared. On she pressed, forgetting the deadly foe on her track, running, stumbling, footsore, half dazed, but still on, when suddenly a crevice or a stone or slippery bit of rock threw her violently to the ground. She struggled again to her feet and started running forward once more to give them that timely warning, to beg them to flee before he came, and to tell them to keep away from this death trap, away from this awful doom. But now she realized that other steps, quicker than her own, were already close at her heels. The next instant, a hand dragged at her skirt, and she was down on her knees again, while something was wound round her mouth to prevent her uttering a scream. Bewildered, half frantic, with the bitterness of disappointment, she looked helplessly around her and bent down quite close to her. She saw through the mist, which seemed to be gathering round her, a pair of keen, malicious eyes, which appeared to her excited brain to have a weird supernatural green light in them. She lay in the shadow of a great boulder. Chauvelin could not see her features, but he passed his thin white fingers over her face. "Oh no! A woman," he whispered. "By all the saints in the calendar. We cannot lose her, that's certain," he muttered to himself. "I wonder now." Suddenly he paused, and after a few seconds of deadly silence, he gave forth a long, low, curious chuckle, while once again Marguerite felt with a horrible shudder his thin fingers wandering over her face. Dear me," he whispered with affected gallantry. "This is indeed a charming surprise." And Marguerite felt her resistless hand raised to Chauvelin's thin, mocking lips. Dang it! This is a twist that I did not expect. I thought she was just going to be watching the entire time. I didn't think that Chauvelin was actually going to be able to grab her and... Uh-oh. Here we go. The situation was indeed grotesque. Had it not been at the very same time so fearfully tragic, the poor, weary woman, broken in spirit and half frantic with her bitterness of disappointment, receiving on her knees the banal gallantries of her deadly enemy. Her senses were leaving her. Half choked with a tight grip around her mouth, she had no strength to move or to utter the faintest sound. The excitement which all along had kept up her delicate body seemed at once to have subsided, and the feeling of blank despair to have completely paralyzed her brain and nerves. Chauvelin must have given some direction, which she was too dazed to hear, for she felt herself lifted from off her feet. The bandage round her mouth was made more secure, and a pair of strong arms carried her toward that tiny red light on ahead, which she had looked upon as a beacon, and the last faint glimmer of hope. Oh man! Uh-oh! We're getting into the thick of it right now. All right, this next chapter is short, so we're just going to go right on ahead because I'm curious. This is chapter 29, Trapped. We have 3 chapters left. That's actually crazy. Ooh, next chapter is long. Ish. She did not know how long she was thus carried along. She had lost all notion of time and space, and for a few seconds, tired nature mercifully deprived her of consciousness. When she once more realized her state, she felt that she was placed with some degree of comfort upon a man's coat, with her back resting against a fragment of rock. The moon was hidden again behind some clouds, and the darkness seemed in comparison more intense. The sea was roaring some 200 feet below her, and on looking all around, she could no longer see any vestige of the tiny glimmer of red light. That the end of this journey had been reached, she gathered from the fact that she heard rapid questions and answers spoken in a whisper quite close by her. "There are 4 men in there," said Toyin. "They are sitting by a fire and seem to be waiting quietly." The hour? Nearly 2 o'clock. The tide? Coming in quickly. The schooner? Obviously an English one, lying some 3 kilometers out, but we cannot see her boat. Have the men taken cover? Yes, said Toyin. They will not blunder. They will not stir until the Englishman comes. Then they will be surrounded and overpower the 5 men. Right? And the lady? Still dazed, I fancy. She's close beside you, said Toyin. And the Jew? He's gagged, and his legs strapped together. He cannot move or scream. Good. Then have your gun ready. In case you want it. Get close to the hut and leave me to look after the lady. Degas evidently obeyed, for Marguerite heard him creeping away along the stony cliffs, and she felt that a pair of warm, thin, talon-like hands took hold of both her own and held them in a grip of steel. Before that handkerchief is removed from your pretty mouth, fair lady, whispered Chauvelin close to her ear, I think it right to give you one small word of warning. What was procured me the honor of being followed across the channel by so charming a companion, I cannot, of course, conceive. But if I mistake not, the purpose of this flattering attention is not one that I would commend itself to my vanity. And I think I am right in surmising, moreover, that the first sound which your pretty lips would utter, as soon as the cruel gag is removed, would be one that would perhaps prove a warning to the cunning fox, which I have been at such pains to track to his lair. She paused a moment, while the steel-like grasp seemed to tighten round her wrist. Then he resumed in the same hurried whisper. Inside that hut, if again I am not mistaken, your brother, Armand St. Just, waits with that traitor de Tournay and the 2 other men unknown to you, for the arrival of the mysterious rescuer, whose identity has for so long puzzled our Committee of Public Safety, the audacious Scarlet Pimpernel. No doubt, if you scream, if there is a scuffle here, if shots are fired, it is more than likely that the same long legs that brought the Scarlet Enigma here will as quickly take him to some place of safety. The purpose, then, for which I traveled all these miles will remain unaccomplished. On the other hand, if it only rests with yourself that your brother Armand shall be free to go off with you tonight, if you like, to England or to any other place of safety. Marguerite could not utter a sound, as a handkerchief was wound round her mouth very tight, but Chauvelin was peering through the darkness very closely into her face. No doubt to her hand gave a responsive appeal to this last suggestion, for presently he continued, What I want you to do to ensure Armand's safety is a very simple thing, dear lady. What is it? Marguerite's hand seemed to convey in response. To remain on this spot without uttering a sound until I give you leave to speak. Ah, but I think you will obey, he added, with that funny dry chuckle of his, as Marguerite's whole figure seemed to stiffen in defiance of this order. For let me tell you that if you scream, nay, if you utter one sound or attempt to move from here, my men, there are 30 of them about, will seize St. Just de Tournay and their 2 friends and shoot them here by my orders, before your eyes. Marguerite had listened to her implacable enemy's speech with ever-increasing terror. Numbed with physical pain, yet she had sufficient mental vitality in her to realize the full horror of this terrible either-or he was once more putting before her. an either or 10,000 times more appalling and horrible than the one he had suggested to her that fatal night at the ball. This time it meant that she should keep still and allow the husband she worshipped to walk unconsciously to his death, or that she should, by trying to give him a word of warning, which perhaps might even be unavailing, actually give the signal for her own brother's death. And that the 3 other unsuspecting men. She could not see Chauvelin, but she could almost feel those keen, pale eyes on his fixed, malicious eyes of his fixed, malicious upon her helpless form, and his hurried, whispered words reached her ear, as the death knell of her last faint, lingering hope. Nay, fair lady, he added urbanely, you can have no interest in anyone save Saint Just, and all you need do for his safety is to remain where you are and to keep silent. My men have strict orders to spare him in every way. As for that enigmatic Scarlet Pimpernel, what is he to you? Believe me, no warning from you could possibly save him. And now, dear lady, let me remove this unpleasant coercion which has been placed before your pretty mouth. You see, I wish you to be perfectly free in the choice which you are about to make. Her thoughts in a whirl, her temples aching, her nerves paralyzed, her body numb with pain, Marguerite sat there in the darkness, which surrounded her as with a pall. From where she sat, she could not see the sea, but she heard the incessant, mournful murmur of the incoming tide, which spoke of her dead hopes, her lost love, the husband she had with her own hand betrayed and sent to his death. Chauvelin removed the handkerchief from her mouth. She certainly did not scream. At that moment she had no strength to do anything but barely hold herself upright and to force herself to think. Oh, think. Of what should she do? The minutes flew on. In this awful stillness she could not tell how fast or how slowly. She heard nothing. She saw nothing. She did not feel the sweet-smelling autumn air, scented with the briny odor of the sea. She no longer heard the murmur of the waves, the occasional rattling of a pebble, as it rolled down some steep incline. More and more unreal did the whole situation seem. It was impossible that she, Margaret Blakeney, the queen of London society, should actually be sitting here on this bit of lonely coast in the middle of the night, side by side with the most bitter enemy. And oh, it was not possible that somewhere, not many 100 feet away perhaps from where she stood, the being she had once despised, who now, in every moment of this weird dreamlike life, became more and more dear. It was not possible that he was unconsciously, even now, walking to his doom, while she did nothing to save him. Why did she not, with unearthly screams that would re-echo from one end of his lonely beach to the other, send without warning to him, to deceased, to retrace his steps, for death lurked here, whilst he advanced. Once or twice the screams rose to her throat, as if by instinct. Then, before her eyes, there stood the awful alternative. Her brother, and those 3 men, shot before her eyes, practically by her orders. She, their murderer. Oh, that fiend in human shape next to her. Knew human female nature well. He had played upon her feelings as a skillful musician plays upon an instrument. He had gauged her very thoughts as to a nicety. She could not give that signal, for she was weak and she was a woman. How could she deliberately order Armand to be shot before her eyes, to have his dear blood upon her head, he dying perhaps with a curse upon her, upon his lips, and little Suzanne's father too, he an old man with the others. Oh, it was all too horrible. Wait, how long? The early morning sped on, and yet it was not dawn. The sea continued its incessant mournful murmur. The autumnal breeze sighed gently in the night. The lonely beach was silent, even as the grave. Suddenly, from somewhere not very far away, a cheerful, strong voice was heard singing, "God save the king." Oh, he's coming. Here we go. Yeah, husband she worshipped. I don't know about that, Marguerite. You're tooting your own horn a little bit too much here. Chapter 30. Chapter 30 is probably the longest one of the book. It's not that long. It's like 8 pages. The next two are long-ish. All right, we'll see. Yeah. Is he really just gonna act like a drunk and like a dumb Englishman? It is so funny to me too. Like Chauvelin doesn't know that Percy is the Scarlet Pimpernel. It's hilarious to me. It's crazy. Come on, put two and two together, dude. Yeah, she's been worshiping him for just, about 24 hours. How her feelings have changed. All right, this is chapter 30, the schooner. Marguerite's aching heart stood still. She felt more than she heard. The men on the watch preparing for the fight. Her senses told her that each, with a sword in each hand, was crouching ready for the spring. The voice came nearer and nearer. In the vast immensity of these lonely cliffs, with the loud murmur of the sea below, it was impossible to say how near or how far, nor yet from which direction came that cheerful singer, who sang to God to save his king, whilst he himself was in such deadly danger. Faint at first, the voice grew louder and louder. From time to time, a small pebble detached itself apparently from beneath the firm tread of the singer, and went rolling down the rocky cliffs to the beach below. Marguerite, as she heard, felt that her life was slipping away, as if when that voice drew near, when that singer became entrapped. She distinctly heard the clicks of Degas' gun close to her. No, 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 no. O God in heaven, this cannot be. Let Armand's blood be upon her own head. Let her be branded as his murderer. Let even he, whom she loved, despise and loathe her for this. But God, O God, save him at any cost. With a wild shriek, she sprang to her feet and darted round the rock against which she had been cowering. She saw the little red gleam through the chinks of the hut. She ran up to it and fell against its wooden walls, which she began to hammer with clenched fists in an almost maniacal frenzy, while she shouted, Armand, Armand, for God's sake, your leader is near. He is coming. He is betrayed. Armand, Armand, fire in heaven's name. She was seen and thrown to the ground. She lay there moaning, bruised, not caring, but still half sobbing, half shrieking. Percy, my husband, for God's sake, fly. Armand, Armand, why don't you fire? One of you stop that woman screaming, hissed Chauvelin, who hardly could refrain from striking her. Something was thrown over her face. She could not breathe, and perforce she was silent. The bold singer, too, had become silent, warned no doubt of his impending danger by Marguerite's frantic shrieks. The men had sprung to their feet. There was no need for further silence on that part. The very cliffs echoed the poor heartbroken woman's screams. Chauvelin, with the muttered oath, which boded no good to her, who had dared to upset his most cherished plans, had hastily shouted the words of command. Into it, my men, and let no one escape from that hut alive. The moon had once more emerged from between the clouds. The darkness on the cliffs had gone, giving place once more to brilliant silvery light. Some of the soldiers had rushed to the rough wooden door of the hut, whilst one of them kept guard over Marguerite. The door was partially open. One of the soldiers pushed it further, but within all was darkness. The charcoal fire only lighting with a dim red light the furthest corner of the hut. The soldiers paused automatically at the door, like machines waiting for further orders. Chauvelin, who was preparing for a violent onslaught from within and for vigorous resistance from the four fugitives under the cover of darkness, was for the moment paralyzed with astonishment when he saw the soldiers standing there at attention like sentries on guard, whilst not a sound proceeded from the hut. Filled with strange, anxious foreboding, he too went to the door of the hut, and peering into the gloom, asked quickly, What is the meaning of this? I think, citoyen, that there is no one here now, replied one of the soldiers imperturbably. You have not let those 4 men go, thundered Chauvelin menacingly. I ordered you to let no man escape alive. Quick, after them, all of you. Quick, in every direction. The men, obedient as machines, rushed down the rocky incline toward the beach, some going off to the right and left as fast as their feet could carry them. You and your men will pay with your lives for this blunder, citoyen sergeant, said Chauvelin viciously to the sergeant who had been in charge of these men. And you too, citoyen, he added, turning with a snarl to Degas, for disobeying my orders. You ordered us to wait, citoyen, until the tall Englishman arrived and joined the 4 men in the hut. No one came, said the sergeant sullenly. But I ordered you just now, when the woman screamed, to rush in and let no one escape. But citoyen, the 4 men who were there before had been gone some time, I think. You think? You? Said Chauvelin, almost choking with fear. And you let them go. You ordered us to wait, citoyen, protested the sergeant, and to impatiently obey your command of pain of death. We waited. I heard the men creep out of the hut, not many times after we took cover. And long before the woman screamed, he added, as Chauvelin seemed quite still, speechless with rage. Hark, said Degas suddenly. In the distance, the sound of repeated firing was heard. Chauvelin tried to peer along the beach below, but as luck would have it, the fitful moon once more hid her light behind the bank of clouds, and he could see nothing. One of you can go into the hut and strike a light, he stammered at last. Stolidly, the sergeant obeyed. He went up to the charcoal fire and lit the small lantern he carried in his belt. It was evidently in the hut. It was evident the hut was quite empty. Which way did they go? Asked Chauvelin. I could not tell, citoyen, said the sergeant. They went straight down the cliffs first and disappeared behind some boulders. Hush, what was that? All 3 men listened attentively. In the very far distance could be heard, faintly echoing and already dying away, the quick, sharp splash of 6 oars. Chauvelin took out his handkerchief and wiped the perspiration from his forehead. The schooner's boat, was all he grasped. Evidently Armand St. Just and his 3 companions had managed to creep along the cliffs, whilst the men, like true soldiers of the well-drilled Republican army, had with blind obedience and in fear of their lives implicitly obeyed Chauvelin's orders to wait for the tall Englishman, who was the important capture. That's hilarious! They had no doubt reached one of the creeks, which jut out far enough out of the sea of the coast of intervals. Behind this, the boat of the Daydream must have been on the lookout for them, and they were by now safely on board the British schooner. As if to confirm this last suspicion, the dull boom of a gun was heard from out at sea. The schooner, citoyen, said Degas quietly. She's off. It needed all Chauvelin's nerve and presence of mind not to give way to a useless and undignified access of rage. There was no doubt now that once again that accursed British head had completely outwitted him. He had now contrived to reach the hut without seeing by one of the 30 soldiers who guarded the spot. Was more than Chauvelin could conceive. That he had done so before 30 men had arrived on the cliff was of course fairly clear. But how he had come over in Reuben Goldstein's cart all the way from Calais without being sighted by various patrols on duty was impossible of explanation. It really seemed as if some point fate watched over that daring Scarlet Pimpernel, and his astute enemy almost felt a superstitious shudder pass through him as he looked round the towering cliffs and the loneliness of this outlying coast. But surely this was reality. In the year of grace, 1792, there were no fairies and hobgoblins about. Chauvelin and his 30 men had all heard with their own ears that accursed voice singing God Save the King. Fully 20 minutes after they had all taken cover around the hut, by that time, the 4 fugitives must have reached the creek and got into the boat, and the nearest creek was more than a mile from the hut. Where had that daring singer got to? Unless Satan himself had lent him wings, he could not have covered that mile on the rocky cliff in the space of 2 minutes. And only 2 minutes had elapsed between his song and the sound of the boat's oars away at sea. He must have remained behind, and was even now hiding somewhere about the cliffs. The patrols were still about. He would be sighted, no doubt. Chauvelin felt hopeful once again. 1 or 2 of the men who had run after the fugitives were now slowly working their way up to the cliff. One of them reached Chauvelin's side at the very moment that his hopes arose in the astute diplomatist's heart. We were too late, citoyen, the soldier said. We reached the beach just before the moon was hidden by that bank of clouds. The boat had undoubtedly been on the lookout behind that first creek a mile off, but she had shoved off some time ago when we got to the beach, and was already some way out to sea when we fired after her. But of course it was no good. She was making straight and quickly for the schooner. We saw her very clearly in the moonlight. Yes, said Chauvelin, with eager anticipation, or with eager impatience. She had shoved off for some time ago, you said, and the nearest creek is a mile further on. Yes, citoyen, I ran all the way straight to the beach, though I guess the boat would have waited somewhere near the creek, as the tide would have reached there earliest. The boat must have shoved off some 3 minutes before the woman began to scream. Some minutes before the woman began to scream. Then Chauvelin's hopes had not deceived him. The Scarlet Pimpernel may have contrived to send the fugitives on ahead of the boat. But he himself had not had time to reach it. He was still on the shore, and all the roads were well patrolled. At any rate, all was not yet lost, and would not be, whilst that impudent Britisher was still on French soil. Bring the light in here, he commanded eagerly, as he once more entered the hut. The sergeant brought his lantern, and together the two men explored the little place. With a rapid glance, Chauvelin noted its contents. The cauldron placed close under an aperture in the wall, and containing the last few dying embers of burned charcoal. A couple of stools overturned as if in haste of sudden departure, and the fisherman's tools and his nets lying in one corner, and beside them something small and white. Pick that up, said Chauvelin to the sergeant, pointing to this white scrap, and bring it to me. It was a crumpled piece of paper, evidently forgotten there by the fugitives in their hurry to get away. The sergeant, much awed by the citoyen's obvious rage and impatience, picked up the paper and handed it respectfully to Chauvelin. Read it, sergeant, said the latter curtly. It's almost illegible, citoyen, a fearful scrawl. I ordered you to read it, repeated Chauvelin viciously. The sergeant, by the light of his lantern, began deciphering a few hastily scrawled words. I cannot quite reach you without risking your lives and endangering the success of your rescue. When you receive this, wait 2 minutes, then creep out of the hut one by one. Turn to your left sharply, and creep cautiously down the cliff. Keep to the left all the time, till you reach the first rock, which you see jutting far out to the sea. Behind it in the creek, the boat is on the lookout for you. Give a long, sharp whistle. She will come up. Get into her. My men will row you to the schooner, and thence to England in safety. Once on board the Daydream, send the boat back for me. Tell my men that I shall be at the creek, which is in a direct line opposite the Chagris near Calais. They know it. I shall be there as soon as possible. They must wait for me at a safe distance out to sea, till they hear the usual signal. Do not delay and obey these instructions implicitly. Ooh, this is definitely a how do they leave this there? This is clearly planned. When you can feel the author's hands. Yeah, I'm kind of with you a little bit. We'll talk about that after. Let's finish this book. My throat, man. Then there is the signature citoyen, added the sergeant, as he handed the paper back to Chauvelin. But the latter had not waited an instant. One phrase of the momentous scrawl had caught his ear. I shall be at the creek, which is in direct line opposite to the Chagris near Calais. That phrase might yet mean victory for him. Which of you knows this coast well? He shouted to his men, who now one by one had all returned from their fruitless run, and were all assembled once more around the hut. I do, citoyen, said one of them. I was born in Calais, and know every stone of these cliffs. There is a creek in direct line from the Chagris. There is, citoyen, I know it well. The Englishman is hoping to reach that creek. He does not know every stone of these cliffs. He may go there by the longest way around. In any case, he will proceed cautiously for fear of patrols. At any rate, there is a chance to get him yet. 1,000 francs to each man who gets to that creek before the long-legged Englishman. I know a shortcut across the cliffs, said the soldier, with an enthusiastic shout. He rushed forward, followed closely by his comrades. Within a few minutes, their running footsteps had died away in the distance. Chauvelin listened to them for a moment. The promise of their reward was lending spur to the soldier of the Republic. The gleam of hate and anticipated triumph was once more apparent on his face. Close to him, Degas still stood mute and impassive, waiting for further orders, whilst two of the soldiers were kneeling beside the prostrate form of Marguerite. Chauvelin gave his secretary a vicious look. His well-laid plan had failed. Its sequel was problematic. There was still a great chance now that the Scarlet Pimpernel might yet escape, and Chauvelin, with that unreasoning fury which sometimes assails a strong nature, was longed to vent his rage on somebody. The soldiers were holding Marguerite pinioned to the ground, though she, poor soul, was not making the faintest struggle. Overwrought nature had at last peremptorily asserted herself, and she lay there in a dead swoon, her eyes circled by deep purple lines that told of long, sleepless nights, her hair matted and damp round her forehead, her lips parted in a sharp curve that spoke of physical pain. The cleverest woman in Europe, the elegant and fashionable Lady Blakeney, who had dazzled London society with her beauty, her wit, and her extravagances, presented a very pathetic picture of tired-out, suffering womanhood, which would have appealed to any but the hard, vengeful heart of her baffled enemy. It is no use mounting guard over a woman who is half dead, he said spitefully to the soldiers, when you have allowed 5 men who were very much alive to escape. Obediently, the soldier rose to their feet. You better try to find that footpath again for me, and that broken-down cart we left on the road. And suddenly a bright idea seemed to strike him. Ah, by the by, where is that Jew? Close by here, citoyen, said Degas. I gagged him and tied his legs together, as you commanded. From the immediate vicinity, a plaintive moan reached Chauvelin's ears. He followed his secretary, who led the way to the other side of the hut, where, fallen into an absolute heap of dejection, with legs tightly pinioned together and his mouth gagged, lay the unfortunate descendant of Israel. His face, in the silvery light of the moon, looked positively ghastly with terror. His eyes were wide open and almost glassy, and his whole body was trembling as if with ague, while a piteous wail escaped his bloodless lips. The rope which had originally been wound round his shoulders and arms had evidently given way, for it lay in a tangle about his body. But he seemed quite unconscious of this, for he had not made the slightest attempt to move from the place where Degas had originally put him. Like a terrified chicken which looks upon a line of white chalk drawn on a table, as on a string which paralyzes its movements. Bring the cowardly brute here, commanded Chauvelin. He certainly felt exceedingly vicious, and since he had no reasonable grounds for venting his ill humor on the soldiers who had but too punctually obeyed his orders, he felt that the son of the despised race would prove an excellent butt. With true French contempt of the Jew, which has survived the lapse of centuries even to this day, he would not go too near him. But he said with biting sarcasm, as the wretched old man was brought in the full light of the moon by the 2 soldiers, I suppose now that, being a Jew, you have good memory for bargains. Answer, he commanded again, as the Jew with trembling lips seemed too frightened to speak. Yes, your honor, stammered the poor wretch. You remember, then, the one that I made together in Calais, when you undertook to overtake Reuben Goldstein, his nag, and my friend the tall stranger, eh? But, your honor. There is no but, I said. Do you remember? Yes, your honor. What was the bargain? There was dead silence. The unfortunate man looked round at the great cliffs, the moon above, the stolid faces of the soldiers, and even the poor, prostrate, inanimate woman close by, but said nothing. Will you speak? Thundered Chauvelin menacingly. He did try, poor wretch, but obviously he could not. There was no doubt, however, that he knew what to expect from the stern man before him. Your honor, he ventured imploringly. Since your terror seems to have paralyzed your tongue, said Chauvelin sarcastically, I must needs refresh your memory. It was agreed between us that if we overtook my friend, the tall stranger, before he reached this place, you were to have 10 pieces of gold. A low moan escaped from the Jew's trembling lips. But, added Chauvelin with slow emphasis, if you deceived me in your promise, you were to have a sound beating, one that would teach you not to tell lies. I did not, your honor. I swear by it. I swear it by Abraham, and by all the other patriarchs I know. Unfortunately, they are still in Hades, and I believe, according to your creed, and you cannot help yourself in much present trouble. Now, you did not fulfill your share of the bargain, and I am ready to fulfill mine. Here, he added, turning to the soldiers, the buckle end of your 2 belts to this confounded Jew. As the soldiers obediently unbuckled their heavy leather belts, the Jew set up a howl that surely would have been enough to bring all the patriarchs out of Hades and elsewhere to defend their descendants from the brutality of this French official. I think I could rely on you, citoyen soldiers, laughed Chauvelin maliciously, to give this old liar the best and soundest beating he has ever experienced. But don't kill him, he added dryly. We will obey, citoyen, replied the soldiers as imperturbably as ever. He did not wait to see his orders carried out. He knew that he could trust these soldiers, who were still smarting under his rebuke, not to mince matters when given a free hand to belabor a third party. When that lumbering coward had his punishment, he said to Degas, the men can guide us as far as the cart, and one of them can drive us back to Calais. The Jew and the woman can look after each other, he added roughly, until we send somebody for them in the morning. They can't run away very far in their present condition, and we cannot be troubled with them just now. Chauvelin had not given up all hope. His men, he knew, were spurred on by the hope of a reward. The enigmatic and audacious Scarlet Pimpernel, alone and with 30 men at his heels, could not reasonably be expected to escape a second time. But he felt less sure now. The Englishman's audacity had baffled him once, whilst the wooded-head stupidity of the soldiers and the interference of a woman had turned his hand, which held all the trumps into a losing one. If Marguerite had not taken up his time, if the soldiers had not had a grain of intelligence, that was a long if. Chauvelin stood for a moment quite still and enrolled 30 odd people in one long, overwhelming anathema. Nature, poetic, silent, balmy. The bright moon, the calm silvery spoke of beauty and of rest. And Chauvelin cursed nature, cursed man and woman, and above all, he cursed all his long-legged, meddlesome British enigmas with one gigantic curse. The howls of the Jew behind him, undergoing his punishment, sent a balm through his heart. Overburdened as it was with a revengeful malice, he smiled. It eased his mind to think that some human being, at least, was, like himself, not altogether at peace with mankind. What a loser this guy is. He turned and took a last look at the lonely bit of coast, where stood the wooden hut, now bathed in moonlight, the scene of the greatest discomfiture he ever experienced by a leading member of the Committee of Public Safety. Against the rock, on a hard bed of stone, lay the unconscious figure of Marguerite Blakeney, while some few paces further on, the unfortunate Jew was receiving on his broad back the blow of 2 stout leather belts, wielded by the stolid arms of the 2 sturdy soldiers of the Republic. The howls of Benjamin Rosenbaum were fit to make the dead rise from their graves. They must have wakened all the gulls from sleep, and made them look down with great interest at their doings of the lords of the creation. That will do, commanded Chauvelin, as the Jew's moans became more and more feeble, and the poor wretch seemed to have fainted away. We don't want to kill him. Obedient, the soldiers buckled on their belts, one of them viciously kicking the Jew to one side. Leave him there, said Chauvelin, and lead the way now quickly to the cart. I'll follow. He walked up to where Marguerite lay and looked down in her face. She had evidently recovered consciousness and was making feeble efforts to raise herself. Her large blue eyes were looking at the moonlit scene round her with her scared and terrified look. They rested with a mixture of horror and pity on the Jew, whose luckless fate and wild howls had been the first signs that struck her with her returning senses. Then she caught sight of Chauvelin in his neat dark clothes, which seemed hardly crumpled after the stirring events of the last few hours. He was smiling sarcastically, and his pale eyes peered down at her with a look of intense malice. With mock gallantry, he stooped and raised her icy cold hands to his lips, which sent a thrill of indescribable loathing through Marguerite's weary frame. I must regret, fair lady, he said in the most suave tones, that circumstances over which I have no control compel me to leave you here for the moment. But I go away, secure in the knowledge that I do not leave you unprotected. Our friend Benjamin here, though a trifle the worse for fear at the present moment, will prove a gallant defender of your fair person, I have no doubt. At dawn, I will send an escort for you. Until then, I feel sure that you will find him devoted, though perhaps a trifle slow. Marguerite had only the strength to turn her head away. Her heart was broken with cruel anguish. One awful thought had returned to her mind, together with gathering consciousness. What had become of Percy? What of Armand? She knew nothing of what had happened after she had heard the cheerful song, God Save the King, which she believed to be the signal of death. I myself, concluded Chauvelin, must now very reluctantly leave you. Au revoir, fair lady. We meet, I hope, soon in London. Shall I see you at the Prince of Wales garden party? No? Ah, well, au revoir. Au revoir. Remember me, I pray, to Sir Percy Blakeney. And with a last ironical smile and bow, he once more kissed her hand and disappeared down the footpath in the wake of the soldiers, and followed the imperturbable Degas. Now this guy's a moron. Like you have bargaining material. Like, not saying that this guy is like, I like this guy or what he's doing. But this is crazy. Why is he just going to leave her here? Like, how dumb is this guy? Ay. It's ague. Ague. Okay. Like, how stupid is he to just leave her here? I guess this is kind of what makes like a villain a villain. They just kind of like act irrationally sometimes. But every once in a while, I wouldn't mind a rational villain. Yeah, he's in a hurry, but still, like, take a second. Like, you're a villain. Sit there and think through what you're doing right now. You're leaving your most important piece off the table. It's just dumb. Like, this makes him a less enjoyable villain to me. Like, he likes torture. He's like a miserable person. But just take her and put her in the cart or something like that. This is just so dumb. Like, he's lost Armand, and he has Armand's sister. You go, this is my most valuable bargaining tool. At the very least, you say, hey, you send a note to England saying, hey, I have this woman, Armand's sister. Give me the Scarlet Pimpernel for this woman, and then I'll be happy. And that's like the whole plot of the book too. Come on. Right now, this is just a dumb villain move. But yeah, it is tunnel vision for sure. And I think that's part of the point of Chauvelin too, that he just has tunnel vision. Like, he has no eyes except for the Scarlet Pimpernel, and he's making a dumb, irrational decision now based on that. All right, chapter 31, the last chapter. Yeah, I guess the cart's not going anywhere. He assumes that she's not going anywhere. The schooner's kind of like out of sight now. But still, just a dumb move. Just a crazy move. I guess he has a guard posted up, so maybe it's a little bit smarter. Maybe he's like, coming back to this, but still, I just don't let her out of your sight. He's acting too irrational here. He's just kind of too stupid. Sorry, one sec. Alrighty. Chapter 31. The Escape. Marguerite listened, half dazed as she was, to the fast retreating firm footsteps of the four men. Wow, fast retreating firm footsteps of the four men. All nature was so still that she, lying with her ear close to the ground, could distinctly trace the sound of their tread, as they ultimately turned into the road, and presently the faint echo of the old cartwheels, the halting gait of that lean nag, told her that the enemy was not a quarter of a league away. Well, we got the horns going. The horns of Gondor. I'm gonna wait till they're done. They're too annoying. It's gonna be another round. Oh, there you go. I was gonna say. Usually it pops on now. The joys of living next to a fire station. It's lunchtime horns. It's just the firehouse. There's probably some kind of emergency going on right now, which serious. But they always pop them on at 6, to make sure all firemen's alarms are synced together. But anytime it happens other than that, it is an actual emergency. Definitely not church bells. It sounds like a tornado siren, to be honest. It's loud. I live like 5 houses away from it. So, all right, let's keep reading. The invigorating scent of the sea was nectar to her wearied body. The immensity of the lonely cliffs was silent and dreamlike. Her brain only remained conscious of its ceaseless and intolerable torture of uncertainty. She did not know. She did not know whether Percy was even now, at this moment, in the hands of the soldiers of the Republic, enduring, as she had done herself, the jibes and jeers of his malicious enemy. She did not know, on the other hand, whether Armand's lifeless body did not lie there in the hut, while Percy had escaped, only to hear that his wife's hands had guided the human bloodhounds to the murder of Armand and his friends. The physical pain of utter weariness was so great that she hoped confidently her tired body could rest here forever. After all the turmoil, the passion, and the intrigues of the last few days, here beneath the clear sky, within the sound of the sea, and with this balmy autumn breeze whispering to her last lullaby, all was so solitary, so silent, like unto dreamland. Even the last faint echo of the distant cart had long ago died away, afar. Suddenly a sound, the strangest undoubtedly that these lonely cliffs of France had ever heard, broke the silent solemnity of the shore. So strange a sound it was that the gentle breeze ceased to murmur, the tiny pebbles to roll down a steep incline, so strange that Marguerite, wearied, overwrought as she was, thought it was the beneficial unconsciousness of approaching death was playing in her half-sleeping senses a weird and elusive trick. It was the sound of a good Salish, absolutely British. Damn. The seagulls in their nests awoke and looked round in astonishment. A distant and solitary owl set up a midnight hoot. The tall cliffs frowned down majestically at the strange, unheard-of sacrilege. Marguerite did not trust her ears. Half raising herself on her hands, she strained every sense to see or hear, to know the meaning of this very earthly sound. All was still again for the space of a few seconds. The same silence once more fell upon the great and lonely vastness. Then Marguerite, who had listened as in a trance, who felt she must be dreaming with that cool, magnetic moonlight overhead, heard again, and this time her heart stood still. Her eyes, large and dilated, looked round her, not daring to trust her other sense. Odd's life, but I wish those demmed fellows had not hit quite so hard. This time it was quite unmistakable. Only one particular pair of essential British lips could have uttered those words in sleepy, drawly, affected tones. Damn, repeated those same British lips emphatically. Zounds, but I'm as weak as a rat. In a moment, Marguerite was on her feet. Was she dreaming? Were those sudden stony cliffs the gates of paradise? Was the fragrant breath of the breeze suddenly caused by the flutter of angels' wings, bringing tidings of uncertain, unearthly joys to her? After all her suffering, or faint and ill, was she the prey of delirium? She listened again, and once again she heard the same very earthly sounds of good, honest British language, not the least akin to whisperings from paradise or flutters of angels' wings. She looked round her eagerly at the tall cliffs, the lonely hut, the great stretch of rock beneath of rocky beach. Somewhere there, above or below her, behind a boulder or inside a crevice, but still hidden from her longing, feverish eyes, must be the owner of that voice, which once used to irritate her, but which now which now would make her the happiest woman in Europe, if only she could locate it. Percy, Percy, she shrieked hysterically. tortured between doubts and hopes. I am here. Come to me. Where are you? Percy, Percy. It is all very well calling me, my dear, said the same sleepy, drawly voice, but odds my life, I cannot come to you. Those demmed frog-eaters have trussed me like a goose on a spit. I am as weak as a mouse. I cannot get away. And still Marguerite did not understand. She did not realize for at least another 10 seconds whence came that voice, so drawly, so dear, but alas, with a strange accent of weakness and of suffering. There was no one within sight, except by that rock. Great God, the Jew! Was she mad or dreaming? Hey, there it is! That's great. His back was against the pale moonlight. He was half crouching, trying vainly to raise himself with his arms tightly pinioned. Marguerite ran up to him, took his head in both her hands, and looked straight into a pair of blue eyes, good-natured, even a trifle amused, shining out of the weird and distorted mask of the Jew. Percy, Percy, my husband, she gasped, faint with the fullness of her joy. Thank God, thank God. La, my dear, he rejoined good-humoredly. We will both do that anon. And you think you can loosen those demmed ropes and release me from my inelegant attitude? She had no knife. Her fingers were numb and weak. She had worked away with her teeth, while great welcome tears poured from her eyes onto those poor pinioned hands. Odds life, he said, when at last, after frantic efforts on her parts, the rope seemed to at last be giving away. But I marvel whether it has ever happened before that the English gentleman allowed himself to be licked by a demmed foreigner, and made no attempt to give as good as he got. It was very obvious that he was exhausted from sheer physical pain, and when at last the rope gave way, he fell in a heap against the rock. Marguerite looked helplessly around her. Oh, for a drop of water on this awful beach, she cried in agony, seeing that she was ready to faint again. Nay, my dear, he murmured, with his good-humored smile. Personally, I should prefer a drop of good French brandy. And you'll dive in the pocket of this dirty old garment. You'll find my flask. I am dimmed if I can move. When he had drunk some brandy, he forced Marguerite to do likewise. Ah, that's better now. Eh, little woman? He said with a sigh of satisfaction. Hi ho, but this is a queer rig up for Sir Percy Blakeney. To be found by his lady, and no mistake, begad, he added, passing his hand over his chin. I haven't been shaved for nearly 24 hours. I must look a disgusting object. As for these curls. And laughingly, he took off the disfiguring wig and curls and stretched out his long limbs, which were cramped from many hours stooping. He bent forward and looked long and searchingly into his wife's blue eyes. Percy, she whispered, while a deep blush suffused her delicate cheeks and neck. If you only knew. I do know, dear, everything, he said with infinite gentleness. And can you ever forgive? I have not to forgive, sweetheart. Your heroism, your devotion, which I, alas, so little deserved, have more than atoned for that unfortunate episode at the ball. Then you knew, she whispered, all the time. Yes, he replied tenderly. I knew all the time. But begad, had I but known what a noble heart yours was, my Margot, I should have trusted you as you deserve to be trusted. And you would not have had to undergo the terrible sufferings of the past few hours in order to run after a husband who has done so much that needs forgiveness. They were sitting side by side, leaning against a rock, and he had rested his aching head on her shoulder. She certainly now deserved the name of the happiest woman in Europe. It is a case of the blind leading the lame, sweetheart, is it not? He said with his good-natured smile of old. Odds life, but I do not know which are the more sore, my shoulders or your feet. He bent forward to kiss them, as they peeped out through her torn stockings and bore pathetic witness to her endurance and devotion. But Armand, she said, with a sudden terror and remorse, as in the midst of her happiness, the image of the beloved brother for whose sake she had so deeply sinned rose now before her mind. Oh, I have no fear for Armand, sweetheart, he said tenderly. Did I not pledge my word to you that he should be safe? He is with de Tournay, and the others are even on board now. Are even now on board the Daydream. But how? She gasped. I do not understand. Yet 'tis simple enough, my dear, he said with that funny, half-shy, half-inane laugh of his. You see, when I found that the brute Chauvelin meant to stick to me like a leech, I thought the best thing I could do, as I could not shake him off, was to take him along with me. I had to get Armand and the others somehow, and all the roads were patrolled, and everyone on the lookout for your humble servant. I knew that when I slipped through Chauvelin's fingers at the Chaugry, that he would lie in wait for me here, whichever way I took. I wanted to keep an eye on him and his doings. And a British head is as good as a French one, any day. Indeed, it had proved to be infinitely better, and Marguerite's heart was filled with joy and marvel, as he continued to recount to her the daring manner in which he had snatched the fugitives away right from under Chauvelin's very nose. Dressed as the dirty old Jew, he said gaily, I knew I should not be recognized. I had met Reuben Goldstein in Calais earlier that evening. For a few gold pieces he supplied me with his rig-out, and undertook to bury himself out of sight of everybody, whilst he lent me his cart and nag. But if Chauvelin had discovered you, she gasped excitedly, your disguise was good, but he is so sharp. Odds fish, he rejoined quietly. Then certainly the game would have been up. I could but take the risk. I know human nature pretty well now, he added, with a note of sadness in his cheery young voice. I know these Frenchmen out and out. They so loathe the Jew that they never come nearer than a couple of yards of him. And begad, I fancy that I contrive to make myself look about as loathsome an object as it is possible to conceive. Yes, and then? She asked eagerly. Zooks. Then I carried out my little plan, that is to say. At first I only determined to leave everything to chance, but when I heard that Chauvelin giving his orders to his soldiers, I thought that fate and I were going to work together after all. I reckoned on the blind obedience of the soldiers. Chauvelin had ordered them on pain of death not to stir until a tall Englishman came. Degas had thrown me down a heap quite close to the hut. The soldiers took no notice of the Jew, who had driven Citoyen Chauvelin to this spot. I managed to free my hands from the ropes, which the brute had trussed me. I always carry pencil and paper with me wherever I go, and I hastily scrawled a few important instructions on a scrap of paper, then looked about me. I crawled up to the hut under the very noses of the soldiers, who lay under cover without stirring, just as Chauvelin had ordered them to do. Then I dropped my little note into the hut, through a chink in the wall, and waited. In this note I told the fugitives to walk noiselessly out of the hut, creep down the cliffs, keep to the left until they came to the first creek, to give a certain signal, when the boat of the Daydream, which lay in wait not far out to sea, would pick them up. They obeyed implicitly. Fortunately for them and for me. The soldiers who saw them were equally obedient to Chauvelin's orders. They did not stir. I waited for nearly half an hour, then knew that the fugitives were safe, and then when I knew the fugitives were safe, I gave the signal, which caused so much stir. And that was the whole story. It seemed so simple, and Marguerite could marvel at the wonderful ingenuity, the boundless pluck and audacity which had evolved and helped carry out this daring plan. But those brutes struck you, she gasped in horror, at the bare recollection of the fearful indignity. Well, that could not be helped, he said gently. Whilst my little wife's fate was so uncertain, I had to remain here by her side. Odds life, he added merrily. Never fear, Chauvelin will lose nothing by waiting, I warrant. Wait till I get him back to England. He shall pay for his thrashing he gave me with a compound interest, I promise you. Marguerite laughed. It was so good to be beside him, to hear his cheery voice, to watch his good-humored twinkle in his blue eyes, as he stretched out his strong arms in longing for that foe, in anticipation of his well-deserved punishment. Suddenly, however, she started. The happy blush left her cheek. The light of joy died out of her eyes, and she heard a stealthy footfall overhead, and a stone had rolled down from the top of the cliffs right down to the beach below. What's that? She whispered in horror and alarm. Oh, nothing, my dear, he muttered with a pleasant laugh. Only a trifle you happen to have forgotten. My friend Ffoulkes. Sir Andrew, she gasped. Indeed, she had wholly forgotten that devoted friend and companion who had trusted and stood by her during all these hours of anxiety and suffering. She remembered him now, tardily, with a pang of remorse. Ah, you had forgotten him, hadn't you, my dear? Said Percy merrily. Fortunately, I met him, not far from the Chaugry, before I had that interesting supper party with my friend Chauvelin. Odds life, but I have a score to settle with that young reprobate. But in the meanwhile, I told him of a very long, very roundabout road that would bring him here by a very circuitous road, which Chauvelin's men would never suspect. Just about the time when we were ready for him, eh, little women? And he obeyed? Asked Marguerite in utter astonishment. Without word or question. See, here he comes. He was not in the way when I did not want him, and now he arrives in the nick of time. Ah, he will make a pretty little Suzanne a most admirable and methodical husband. In the meanwhile, Sir Andrew Ffoulkes had cautiously worked his way back down the cliffs. He stopped once or twice, pausing to listen for the whispered words, which would guide him to Blakeney's hiding place. Blakeney, he ventured to say at last cautiously. Blakeney, are you there? The next moment he rounded the rock against which Sir Percy and Marguerite were leaning, and seeing that weird figure still clad in the long Jew gabardine, he paused in sudden, complete bewilderment. But already Blakeney had struggled to his feet. Here I am, friend, he said with his funny inane laugh. All alive, though I do look a begad scarecrow in these dim things. Zooks, ejaculated Sir Andrew in boundless astonishment as he recognized the leader. Of all the young man had seen Marguerite, and happily checked the forcible language that rose to his lips. At sight of the exquisite Sir Percy in this weird and dirty garb. Yes, said Blakeney calmly, of all the my friend. I have not yet had time to ask you what you were doing in France when I ordered you to remain in London. Insubordination? What? Wait till my shoulders are less sore, and by gad, see the punishment you'll get. Odds fish, I'll bear it, said Sir Andrew with a merry laugh, seeing that you are alive to give it. Would you have had me allow Lady Blakeney to do the journey alone? But in the name of heaven, man, where did you get these extraordinary clothes? Well, they're a bit quaint, aren't they? Laughed Sir Percy jovially. But odds fish, he added, with sudden earnestness and authority. Now you are here, folks. We must lose no more time. That brute Chauvelin may send someone to look after us. Marguerite was so happy she could have stayed there forever, hearing his voice asking 100 questions. But at mention of Chauvelin's name, she started in quick alarm, afraid for the dear life she would have died to save. But how can we get back? She gasped. The roads are full of soldiers between here and Calais. And we are not going to get back to Calais, sweetheart, he said, but just the other side of the Grenay, not a half league from here. The boat of the Daydream will meet us there. The boat of the Daydream? Yes, he said with a merry laugh. Another little trick of mine. I should have told you that when I slipped that note into the hut, I also added another for Armand, which I directed him to leave behind. And which has sent Chauvelin and his men running full tilt back to the Chaugree after me. But after the first little note contained my real instructions, including those to Briggs, he had my orders to go further out to sea than toward the west, when well out of sight of Calais. He will send the galley to a little creek here, he and I know of, just beyond the Grenay. The men will look out for me. We have a preconcerted signal, and we will all be safely aboard, while Chauvelin and his men solemnly sit and watch the creek, which is just opposite the Chaugree. By the other side of the Grenay, but I cannot walk, Percy, she moaned helplessly, as, trying to struggle to her feet, she found herself unable to even stand. I will carry you, my dear, he said simply. The blind leading the lame, you know. Sir Andrew was ready, too, to help with the precious burden, but Sir Percy would not entrust his beloved to any arms but his own. When you and I are safely aboard on the Daydream, he said to his young comrade, I feel that Mademoiselle Suzanne's eyes will not greet me in England with reproachful looks. Then it will be my turn to rest. And his arms, still vigorous in spite of fatigue and suffering, closed round Marguerite's poor, weary body, and lifted her as gently as if she had been a feather. Then Sir Andrew discreetly kept out of earshot, and there were many things said, or rather whispered, which even the autumn breeze did not catch, for it had gone to rest. All his fatigue was forgotten. His shoulders must have been very sore, for the soldiers had hit hard. But the man's muscles seemed made of steel, and his energy was almost supernatural. It was a weary tramp, half a league along the stony side of the cliffs, but never for a moment did his courage give way, or his muscles yield to fatigue. On he trampled, with firm footsteps, the vigorous arms encircling the precious burden, and no doubt as she lay, quiet and happy, at times lulled to momentary drowsiness, at others watching, through the slowly gathering morning light, the pleasant face with the lazy, drooping blue eyes, ever cheerful, ever illuminated with a good-humored smile. She whispered many things, which helped to shorten the weary road, and acted as a soothing balsam to his aching sinews. The many-hued light of dawn was breaking in the east when at last they reached the creek beyond Greenay. The galley lay in wait. In answer to a signal from Sir Percy, she drew near. The two sturdy British sailors had the honor of carrying my lady into the boat. Half an hour later, they were on board the Daydream. The crew, who, of necessity, were in their master's secrets and who were devoted to him heart and soul, were not surprised to see him arriving in so extraordinary a disguise. Armand St. Just and the other fugitives were eagerly awaiting the advent of their brave rescuer. He would not stay to hear the expressions of their gratitude, but found his way to his private cabin as quickly as he could, leaving Marguerite quite happy in the arms of her brother. Everything on board the Daydream was fitted with that exquisite luxury so dear to Sir Percy Blakeney's heart, and by the time they had all landed at Dover, he had found time to get into some of the sumptuous clothes which he loved, and which he always kept on a supply on board his yacht. The difficulty was to provide Marguerite with a pair of shoes, and great was this little middy's joy when my lady found that she could put foot on English shore in his best pair. The rest is silence and joy for those who endured so much suffering, yet found at last a great and lasting happiness. But it is recorded that on the brilliant wedding of Sir Andrew Ffoulkes with Suzanne de Tournay, a function at which H.R.H., the Prince of Wales, and all the elite of fashionable society were present, the most beautiful woman there was unquestionably Lady Blakeney, whilst the clothes Sir Percy Blakeney wore were the talk of the jeunesse dorée of London for many days. It is also a fact that Monsieur Chauvelin, the accredited agent of the French Republican government, was not present at that or any other social function in London after that memorable evening at Lord Grenville's ball. Hey! All done. That was a fun read. Not like the greatest piece of literature that I've ever read in my life, for sure. But they all lived happily ever after. The ending of this book was interesting. I thought it was going to be a bit more like intricate. Like I was expecting the League to be there. I was even expecting him to like transport Armand and the Comte or whoever, the Tournay guy, maybe in the cart with Chauvelin or something like that. But this definitely feels like a series. Like this is the first book, obviously, and it feels like she could just like keep going on with this. Yeah, like until the next adventure. But it was pretty basic, but it's still kind of fun. It was still like fun. It's like a good, fun book to kind of sit and try to dissect and try to figure out what the plot is. Characters aren't crazy in depth, but still, it was just kind of fun. You don't like mysteries? I feel like it was like half mystery. Like it was revealed to us too quickly what was happening. Not necessarily too quickly, but it was revealed too quickly. I guess you could just kind of figure it out a little bit. But it was fun. It was definitely a fun read. I gotta think more about this. Yeah, I had a good time reading that one. It's a fun adventure for sure. Doesn't feel like a like behemoth of literature. And it's interesting that this is a classic. I think this is probably a classic because it's one of the first of its kind, I'm guessing. Because it literally, like writing wise, it does not feel like a classic. Swashbuckling is popular for a reason, for sure. Yeah, it's not like a mysterious mystery. Totally agree with that. It is fun to guess. And like it's like she like leaves you enough that you can kind of guess certain things on. Definitely a little pulpy, but still, it's like swashbuckling kind of fun. I don't mind a book like this because it's just like a fun book. Again, not maybe the greatest piece of literature ever, but definitely a classic. Yeah, a classic of the genre is for sure. It's not a literary classic, but a classic of, I guess, like swashbuckling mystery kind of. Again, it does feel like Zorro meets the French Revolution meets Batman. It's kind of has that vibe. The first of the mass vigilante trope. Interesting. Yeah, the concept of the hero who has a stupid persona. Yeah, totally. It has this like Batman kind of vibe to it. But this is because I guess we have different mysteries now, and there's a lot of books that are kind of mysteriously written. But there are certain things that are just like there's certain things in here that are just too basic and simple. Like she had a good plot in her mind, but like even the ending of how everything was figured out and discovered, like there was one or two parts that were fun to guess, but I was hoping there was going to be more like, oh, I didn't even see that coming. That's crazy that happened, and nothing really was like that. Like I think I kind of like recognized that the Jew was Percy pretty quickly. But my issue was that's the only bit of guessing that you really have at the end of the novel. Like I was really hoping that there was going to be some other trick or a thing that was going on there. And she kind of fits some things together, but some things are just not necessarily like, right there. Stan Lee was inspired by this book? Interesting. That's cool. Yeah, the enemies of Zora are kind of stupid. That's very true. Yeah, my dad is reading the third one right now, and he says it's much better than than the first one, or maybe not much better, but he says the plot is a bit more fun. Yeah, AC, I'm totally with you. This would be fun as like a weekly installment and it's really funny because not that I kept thinking that this was a children's story, but it's interesting that a lot of people read this when they're a child because it's not a children's story really, but it's like written as one. Like the mystery element to this is very children's story like, but the mystery element still isn't that crazy as far as mysteries are concerned. Like the mystery element, I'm going to compare it to like the first Harry Potter, which is like a fun mystery element, or even like the third one. Because the second one is not really like, you can't really guess what's happening in the third one. You can kind of guess what's happening in some of the other ones. Like the first Harry Potter, the third Harry Potter, the fourth are all things that you're guessing at. And all of those are written as significantly better mysteries than this book, I think. Because there's things in there that are like, you can figure that out. And then at the end when things are revealed, you're like, that blew my mind. I totally didn't see that. And then on a second read, you're like, wow, I knew that. This one felt a little bit more straightforward. Yeah, like this is like definitely like a little Saturday morning serial. Like you get your newspaper every morning, and then you just kind of like read the next chapter, the next installment of this. Totally agree with that. It's definitely a fun story, but it's not like it's not incredible. I would probably be interested in reading some of the other ones just on my own time, but yeah, it's a suspenseful romance, honestly. I think maybe one of the issues that I might have with this book, one of the issues I might have is it almost tries to be too many genres. Maybe that's like the biggest issue. I think this book could have been better if it was longer. And I don't really say that with a lot of books. Usually I say the opposite. Usually I say books like Wuthering Heights needed to be 200 pages shorter. Not really. That to me, that's like a master in like you're just sitting with the characters for so long. But this is like too many genres in one. She tries to make this a mystery. She tries to make this a romance. She tries to make this a swashbuckling tale. She tries to make this like a very plot driven like revenge tale. Like I think there's just too many things in this that she's trying to do that get distracting on what the actual purpose of this book is. But I don't know if she necessarily knew that either. Maybe she was just trying to write a fun tale. I don't discredit anybody for that. But I think it was just too, this book would have been better longer. I think that. Maybe the long version of this book is like the Count of Monte Cristo or something. I don't know. I really forgot how most of that goes. But the writing wasn't great either. Like the writing was okay, but so many strangely long sentences with very little varied up. Like Jane Austen had long sentences, but she varied her sentences. And her long sentences were like purposeful. This one didn't necessarily feel like her long sentences were purposeful. It felt like her sentences were her not necessarily knowing how to write sentences that well. That's maybe a harsh critique. Regard the sequels as making it longer. Interesting. But I do think that maybe the sequels will like get into more of this book. But this book by itself, this storyline was too quick for me. Like I didn't have time to sit with the characters enough to really understand them. Because it's a plot-driven novel, which again, I don't think it's bad to be a plot-driven novel. But this is definitely what people talk about when they talk about plot-driven novels. The characters are just a little bit too cartoonish. Not cartoonish, like cardboard cutout kind of characters. The Muppets doing this would be kind of fun. Yeah, and Sparky, Count of Monte Cristo is probably coming up. I'm guessing in the summer. I'm trying to make it in the summer, but it's going to take us 4 to 5 months to do that one. So I'm trying to figure that out. We'll see. Yeah, Jasper, I feel like I probably agree with you on that. This is a good for an author. Like I would hate as an author, and this is why like I really credit her, because I would hate as an author for your first book to be like your most popular one. Because her writing probably gets better as the series goes on. Like I'm sure that the rest of the Scarlet Pimpernel series gets better. But this is her most popular one. And that kind of sucks. Because she probably refines her identity as like a mystery writer or a swashbuckling kind of writer. And she probably continues to grow in this every single sentence. And the first one that she wrote is the most popular. And it's the one that gets judged the most. But this definitely feels like a pilot episode for the rest of it. Where like she has to be economical with certain things in this pilot episode to get published. That's why a lot of pilot episodes just stink. I mean, some pilot episodes are good, but when you look back on them, they're like the characters are just like cardboard cutouts, and they're just like, okay, this pilot episode was just trying to get funding from like people, and now they actually did. And it definitely feels like a pilot episode for me. Oh, fun. Homeschool update. Swapping out the next schedule. Lit reading from the Odysseys of the Hobbit, since we just did the Iliad this term. We're almost done with the Animal Farm also. We should do Animal Farm on this channel eventually. Although maybe not. It's too political. Ooh, they moved this to World War II, getting people out of Germany. Interesting. That's kind of fun. I feel like you can make a ton of different adaptations with this. I'm surprised someone didn't do that with World War II. Is there a comparison with a book that does that with World War II? I don't want to see that movie though. Man, I'm not even gonna go watch that movie. That movie looks terrible. When does the movie actually come out? I saw a trailer for that movie and I was like, no. Ooh, also the trailer for the new Harry Potter looks so good. Oh my gosh, that makes me so excited. I cannot wait for that movie or for that series to come out. It looks so good. But yeah, I don't know how. I would probably rate this book like a 5 out of 10. Fun plot wise. It's plot driven. Like it was just like an average book for me. Fun, but like it's not earth shattering. Like Wuthering Heights was brutal to read. Hated every second of reading that. But toward the end, you understand why she wrote it. There was significance behind it. This one didn't really feel like that to me. It was like a fun plot. Toward the end, I was like a little bummed that it was too simple. It was that simple, but still, like, it's a fun book. I don't, you're not going to love every single book that you read. Ooh, the Pimpernel adaptations are on YouTube. Interesting. Animal Farms made your daughter so annoyed. I love that. I feel like that should So she's got her head screwed on straight. Maybe we'll do Animal Farm eventually. I don't know. We'll see. I definitely am not going to go see that movie, though, because that movie does not look good. I am... Ooh, okay, guys. Quick update on things. I know some of you don't follow every single channel that I write or that I make because I have way too many. I probably shouldn't do as many channels as I do. This is the big update that I have. So I am currently reading... this is funny. I am currently reading the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. And I'm posting videos on a channel called First Time Readers, where that's just going to become like fun first time reads. And after I finish reading those, I was going to do the Stormlight archives because that's Brandon Sanderson, and that channel was originally just going to be Brandon Sanderson stuff. But I don't want to have like 50 channels, so I'm just going to really just keep 5 and kind of talk about different books. And on that channel, the next rather than going to the Stormlight archive, I am going to read Dune. And I'm going to kind of do some of the same stuff that I'm doing for like the Game of Thrones channel and this channel and the Lord of the Rings channel and the Harry Potter channel, but with Dune. So if you want, you can subscribe because I'll probably start this in the next month because I saw the trailer for the third movie and I said, I need to read that book before I see the third movie. Because the Dune series is I think the movies are incredible. I think they're such good movies. But people hate them because they say they're terrible adaptations. And I want to see. I don't know if that book's going to be... I have a feeling it's not going to be as well written as like a Lord of the Rings or even like as a Pride and Prejudice. But I'm really curious to see the ins and outs of that series and just to talk about it. I feel like there's going to be a lot of themes to talk about because I think he's being a bit more heavy-handed for certain things that he's writing. That's at least what I've heard with George Herbert. He got through it last year. It's funny because some people say it's a struggle to get through, and some people are enamored with it and love it. I'll probably read like the first 3, maybe the first 6, and then do that. But I'm definitely going to read the first one at least. The first 2, I'm going to try to do the first 2. Well, I'll definitely do the first 2 before December because December is when the third movie comes out. And I think the third movie kind of covers the second book-ish, maybe. It seems like it's a classic for a reason. Meg, that's what my channels are. They're just traps for you to read the books that you don't want to read. You guys gotta. That's interesting that you couldn't watch. That you can watch the first Dune or you couldn't finish the first Dune. Sci-fi doesn't excite me all that much either, to be completely honest. I don't really like sci-fi, but this series is just different for me. It doesn't really feel like sci-fi. It feels like something else. Like it's like sci-fantasy kind of, but it is the actual series. Like I would compare it to like a Lord of the Rings, where it's not a perfect adaptation probably because I haven't read the book, so I don't really know. Yeah, and I've heard that too. The characters in Dune are just archetypes, but I think the movies are so well made. Like I would put them not on like level ground with like Lord of the Rings because that was like just its own thing, but I'm so hyped for the next movie. It's just such good filmmaking, I think. So I'm gonna read Dune. If any of you want to subscribe. Yeah, I'll probably do and like the Golden Compass is one that I'll probably do on that channel as well. I'll end up doing the Stormlight archive on that channel. That one's just gonna be like fun reads that I don't really want to like make crazy long videos for. But maybe I will eventually. But it's gonna be more like this channel where like we read something and then I just chat about it. But no real live reads probably. Project Hail Mary, such a good movie. So good. I also did like the book, Nemo, against what you say. I did like the book. It had its problems. It wasn't like a perfectly written book, but I would say like Project Hail Mary, like I liked more than I liked the Scarlet Pimpernel. I haven't done the Magicians, so I'll add that to the list. We have a huge list that we have to do. I'm going to be busy for the next 30 years just reading all these books. Project Hail Mary is a fun listen. So I went on a phase of, I'll say this. Okay. I classify this as like fun reads. So I went on like a phase of I just needed something to not be like that crazy deep of a book, and I just need to relax and listen to a book as I'm taking my dog for a walk. Because I was taking like long walks, and I was like I need something to listen to other than like a podcast. So I started to listen, and I was like I can't really listen to classics. This is how this channel even came up. I was like I can't read classics because classics I don't think should necessarily be listened to like this. Like I would rather read a classic. I want to like devote time to reading a classic. And I started listening to like books like Ready Player One. I listened to that. I listened to Armada. I listened to most of the stuff that guy wrote, except Ready Player Two. I haven't listened to that one yet. And they're like easy listens. And then I did Project Hail Mary. And then I did I'm doing Dungeon Crawler Carl now. And a few other random ones that I tried to get through, but I really couldn't. Like I tried to do American Gods and just couldn't. I was like so bored of that. Maybe I'll revisit that sometime. But Project Hail Mary out of those kind of books is probably my favorite one. Like I think it's better than Dungeon Crawler Carl. Although Dungeon Crawler Carl is just longer. Like I would say that the writing in Project Hail Mary is better than Dungeon Crawler Crawler, but the writing in Project Hail Mary is incredible. It's just like he's writing to it for it to be adapted into a movie. You would rather not read anything that doesn't make you think. Yeah, I half agree with that. Like I like a good classic, but like I also like a book that's just like a mindless book that you just listen to, having fun with. 3 tries to listen to American Gods, and I don't know if I heard it all. I like that you're doing a little more sci-fi than fantasy. That's kind of funky. I mean, I've only listened to both of them, so I can't say like an actual reading experience. But I would definitely say that Project Hail Mary to me is better than Dungeon Crawler Carl. Yeah, I need some escapism, And like obviously better, like Lord of the Rings is better escapism than some of these others. Yeah, I definitely think Project Hail Mary is better than Dungeon Crawler Carl, at least the first one. Maybe it's not as sciencey as proper, but I haven't done Ender's Game, so that will be added to the list too. Your mom listened to Old Man in the Sea and hated it, and she found out she had it on shuffle. No way! That is hilarious. That's so funny. That is absolutely hilarious. I love that so much. She's like, why is this so confusing? That is one of the funniest. That's like a comedy bit right there. That is so funny. So I don't distinguish between listening and reading either. Like if I listen to a book, I say that I've read that book. But at the same point, I always get more out of reading a book, physically reading a book, than listening. Although there are some, again, there's just books that I listen to and there's some books that I read. Like I don't think that I can listen to, like I tried listening to a Lord of the Rings or the Lord of the Rings and I couldn't get anything out of that. My mind was just blank. It was like too well written for me to listen to it. Like there is some writing that's supposed to be like dazzling and you're supposed to read. There's some writing that you're just supposed to like. I find like the Dungeon Crawler Carl and the Project Hail Mary are books that I'm fine listening to because I don't think they're supposed to dazzle me literally. Like the writing isn't supposed to be like, oh my gosh, I just want to soak up every little ounce of this writing. To me, it's just story-oriented books. Like the Scarlet Pimpernel is probably a better listen than it is a read, I think. Because plot-driven novels to me are supposed to be like that. I'm kind of with you at that point too. Like I try to listen to books that I've already read because I already kind of know where they are. I do struggle with audiobooks a lot because my mind gets distracted. And if I like forget and if I am not focused on listening, I need to re-listen to that section about a bunch. But I only have so many hours in a day to read. Like it'd be fun to read Dungeon Crawler Carl, but I just don't even have any time. So I have time when I'm taking Wes for a walk and I can't have a physical book when I'm doing that. So, I just listen, pop some headphones in and listen. So is life. Yeah, I totally agree. Like when I'm listening to books, I definitely miss stuff. I can't even remember characters' names half the time when I listen to stuff. But I still don't think there's a problem with listening to books like that. That's like it's like a bedtime story. Like I'm listening on like a little walk. It's like a little walk story. And I care less for the details and more for the whole plot of it. So I don't mind that I missed some stuff. But Dune is definitely one that I'm gonna read. Some of these books like Ender's Game, like Dune, Game of Thrones. I'm reading that kind of stuff. I can't just listen to that. There's too much I want to dissect and talk about to listen to it. But that's that. All in all, Scarlet Pimpernel, kind of fun. But 5 out of 10. Just like an average book. I enjoyed it more than Wuthering Heights. Whole 100%. I mean, I enjoy any book more than Wuthering Heights. But it's not a better book than Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights seems like it had a better purpose. It's like character driven versus plot driven. We can talk about this forever. Interesting for dialect for Dickens. I'm curious to see what we're gonna do when we get to The Tale of Two Cities, which that's the next read. We'll end on this. Tale of Two Cities is the next read. I have it right there, sitting right there. It's right below Great Expectations. So we could just change it up and do Great Expectations, but Great Expectations looks like it's a third longer than A Tale of Two Cities. And I have the Iliad there. Wow. I didn't even know I had the Iliad in my library. I just took a bunch of Penguin Classics from a library sale a long time ago, and I just have a bunch there that are just sitting there. Dickens got paid by the word, and it shows. Interesting. We'll see. I'm curious to see how I like it. I think some of his characters are like renowned and hilarious. Which translation? Let me look real quick. It's a Penguin Classic. Oh no, it's a Wordsworth Classic. Not a Penguin Classic, a Wordsworth Classic. Translation, John Meyer. John Meyer is Chapman. Translated by George Chapman. Introduction and notes by Adam Roberts. This is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I don't know if I got to figure out if I can do this live or not. I might not be. Might need to focus on this too much. If there's a best translation, we'll tackle that when we get there. We'll figure out. I'm always down to pick up another $5 copy of a cheap translation. It's old. Okay, we'll see. All right, guys. I'm gonna jump off. I'm gonna get some work done. Happy weekend. Happy Friday. And we'll probably start A Tale of Two Cities. I'd guess let's say we'll start it sometime next week. Maybe like probably not on a Sunday night, but potentially Sunday night. But maybe probably not on a Monday. It'll either be late Sunday night or Tuesday sometime. Probably. So we'll take it then. We'll do a little live read of Tale of Two Cities. So hopefully you guys join for that book too. I'm pretty excited for it. But yeah, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed the read. It was fun. I'll see you guys. Have a great weekend and see you guys soon. Bye.